Chapter 806. The Prince of Luling smiled and said, "It's fine, but I need to buy some medicinal ingredients to make a new disguise. This Lushan County is too small, so I'm afraid I don't have all the medicinal ingredients I need. However, some things can be replaced with other things. Even though the effect will be a bit weaker, I can still pass off as the real thing." She lightly said, "After all, it's impossible for an outsider to come to my side and take a good look at me. If an outsider really does come to my side, then whether I disguise myself or not would be of no use." Her voice was gentle and pleasing to the ear, definitely the voice of a woman. Those who had heard her voice knew that this was her, Gu Zhuting. In fact, even though Yang Fan had already announced that the prince was fake and that Miss Gu was in disguise, she had always used the Prince of Luling's voice and appearance regardless of who was in front of or behind them. Her mannerisms were also exactly the same as the Prince of Luling. She usually had a wooden appearance, and when she encountered an enemy, her panicked and slow reactions were also completely the same. In the beginning, everyone secretly praised Miss Gu for being able to pass off the fake as the real one, but gradually many people began to have their suspicions. They thought that Yang Xiaowei was pretending to be the real Prince of Luling, and that this fake Prince of Luling was the real one. However, when the Prince of Luling opened his mouth and confirmed that it was indeed Gu Zhuting's voice, and there was even a patch of skin that definitely belonged to a woman on her face, everyone couldn't help but believe that Yang Xiaowei was really so bold as to only have Su Liang and Gaoing escort the prince as they left. Yang Fan frowned and said, "Our plan to attract the assassins and pave the way for the prince has just begun. At this time, we absolutely cannot let the assassins see through us. I'll accompany you to find the medicinal ingredients you need. You must immediately disguise yourself again." The Prince of Luling nodded in agreement. Li Gua'er excitedly said, "I'll go too. I've been holding myself back for so long." The young princess was currently the most distinguished person among them, since she had made a request in front of everyone. Yang Fan couldn't very well refuse and could only agree. Lan Yiqing said, "Xiaowei, the sisters also need to go out and buy some things. We've used up a lot of things along the way, so the sisters are in a sorry state. I'm afraid we'll have to face many dangers from now on, and our chances of entering the city will be greatly reduced." So you see, when Lan Yiqing said this, many female guards quietly blushed. It was more troublesome for women to go out than men. Even when they were disguised as men, they were still women inside. The things they needed were not rouge, face powder, or eyebrow makeup, but some things that had to be prepared because of the different physiological characteristics of men and women. Although Lan Yiqing said it implicitly, it was inevitable that the female guards would feel a little embarrassed when he mentioned it in front of so many men. Yang Fan thought about it and said, "All right. In any case, there's nothing to look after in the shop. Aside from the injured ones, everyone else can go out for a walk. But remember, each group must have at least 2 people, and one of them must be a woman. You fellows from the 100 Cavalry Division are brave and fierce and love to cause trouble. I don't want another incident like Fongling to happen. Internal guards, keep an eye on them." Everyone agreed to go out in groups. Some even formed groups of several people. When the room was empty, leaving only Yang Fan, the Prince of Luling, Li Gua'er, and Huang Xuchang, Yang Fan said to Huang Xuchang in a low voice, "Lushan County is the first city we must pass on our way back north. They must have a contact here. If the traitor is going to make a move, it will be today." Huang Xuchang's eyes widened, revealing a trace of ferocious, murderous intent. "I understand. Wait for me to drag out this traitorous bastard." Humph, humph. An official who was passing by recently checked into the inn in Lushan County. No one knew his specific identity, and no one knew where he was going. For a long time, the officials who passed by this place, unless they were not in a hurry on official business, wanted to see the scenery along the way or wanted to visit local relatives and friends. Otherwise, they would not stay in the inn for more than 2 days. Mount Lu was a small county with no unique scenery. That was why the people at the post house had never seen anyone stay in the post house for 8 or 9 days. This time they had finally seen it. This official, surnamed Li Dingxin, stayed in the inn in Lushan County for 9 days and did not have any intention of leaving. However, he was personally escorted here by the county magistrate, so the people in the inn didn't dare to ask too many questions. They only cared about serving him 3 meals a day, cold drinks and hot soup, and didn't let this noble person find fault with them. In any case, whether it was living or eating, they did not need to spend money from their home. This noble, named Li Dingxin, traveled all over the world and stayed here for 9 days. Every day, there would be people coming to the inn to look for him. They acted mysteriously and no one knew what they were up to. Thinking that it was better to avoid trouble, the inn's deputy pretended to be deaf and mute and did not ask any questions. In the afternoon, a man named Li Daong barged into the inn. He had a shoulder injury, and he looked like a fiend, like a fugitive. The deputy tried to stop him, but he was slapped in the face. The other party flashed the tortoise talisman, and only then did the deputy know that this damned vicious bandit was actually one of the family warriors of the Prince of Wei. The deputy did not dare to stop him and let him barge in. Immediately, a wave of cursing came from inside Li Dingxin's official residence. Listening to the sound, it was Li Daong cursing at Li Dingxin, and then Li Dingxin cursed at Li Daong. The two of them were cursing to their heart's content, and the deputy heard them from afar and could not help but feel pleased. However, hearing the two of them talk about the Prince of Liang and the Prince of Wei, the deputy was not stupid. He knew that the two of them had an extraordinary background, and their movements were so secretive. He was afraid that they might be involved in some shady business, afraid that he would get into trouble. He did not dare to listen and hurriedly ran away. Listening to the two of them smashing tables and throwing chairs at each other, he secretly laughed. At dusk, another person dressed like a peddler also came to the inn to look for someone. The deputy, who had been slapped in the morning, had learned his lesson. This time, he did not directly chase the person away. After asking about the person's origins, he found that the person was indeed looking for Li Dingxin. The deputy did not dare to delay, and hurriedly brought the person to see Li Dingxin, and then obediently left. "What did you say?" Hearing the peddler's report, Li Dingxin was shocked. He suddenly stood up from behind the table and grabbed the peddler's collar. Staring at him, he asked, "Is this true?" The peddler forcefully nodded and said with certainty, "Absolutely true. This is the information this lowly one has received." After the young Fan was ambushed at Gushui Town, he thought of this method. He took the risk of letting the Prince of Luling go north alone, and he made a fake Prince of Luling to attract our attention. Li Dingxin gritted his teeth and said, "That trash Wachilin usually boasted so much, but didn't he still fail on the verge of success? Humph." The peddler probed. "Today I heard someone say that there are countless corpses on the Liang Pass. Could it be that our people fought with them?" Li Dingxin said, "It's not our people, it's Prince of Wei's people. They're also a bunch of trash. That idiot Shinhongi is dead, and that bastard Li Daong still came." At this point, Li Dingxin suddenly stopped, and his expression changed. Not good. Before that servant Li Daong left, he said that he wanted to gather his troops. Even if he had to fight openly, he wanted to bury them here. If he gathered all the people scattered on the roads here, wouldn't that be falling right into Yang Fan's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain? No, I have to go find him. Li Dingxin hurriedly took 2 steps, and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly called over a subordinate and carefully instructed him, "Go quickly!" A man, a woman, and an old man in his 50s. This kind of target is really hard to find. After sending the subordinate away, Li Dingxin hurriedly left. By the time he arrived at the inn that Li Daong was staying at, Li Daong's group had already paid the bill and left, leaving only a few disabled people wailing in the inn. When he asked them about Li Daong's whereabouts, these people stared at each other, unable to say anything. Li Dingxin was so angry that he slammed the door and left. The people who went to the county to buy personal items returned to the inn one after another. Not long after the last person returned, Huang Xuchang hurried back. When he arrived at Yang Fan's room and saw that there was no one there, he went to the bedroom of Prince of Luling. Only then did he see Yang Fan sitting there. The inner room's curtains were drawn, and he could see Prince of Luling dressing up in front of a mirror. Although men also needed to comb their hair and tidy up their appearance in front of a mirror, if they were to dress up like a woman, elegance would inevitably turn into horror. Huang Xuchang only took a glance and shivered. This was clearly a man in his 50s with a plump body and a face full of wrinkles. His fingers were bent like an orchid, and his movements were as romantic as a woman's. How could Huang Xuchang dare to look at him again? The moment Yang Fan saw him, he hurriedly went up to greet him. Without waiting for him to speak, he cut him off. "Follow me. We'll talk in my residence." Yang Fan brought Huang Xuchang to his residence, and Huang Xuchang immediately knelt on one knee and cupped his fists in apology. Yang Fan asked in surprise, "Commander Huang, what are you doing?" Huang Xuchang said with shame and hatred, "This lowly officer has failed the commandant's trust." Yang Fan's expression sank. "What is it?" Huang Xuchang said, "The spy. I didn't find out." Yang Fan frowned. "Tell me the details." Huang Xuchang said, "After they left, we kept a close eye on them. The inner guards have received my instructions to keep a close eye on all the suspicious people. These people mostly go to wine and meat shops. They don't dare to buy wine, so most of them buy things like pig's head meat and pig's ears." Huang Xuchang said, "Other than that, they wandered around, and although they came into contact with the people in the marketplace, they didn't buy anything. I increased the surveillance on everyone they came into contact with and everyone they spoke to without being heard. In the end, there was nothing unusual. After they left, those people they came into contact with didn't leave in a hurry either." Yang Fan said quietly, "There must be a spy. The news must have been leaked. It's not that there are no suspicious people. It's just that we didn't discover it." Huang Xuchang nodded. "Yes. This Huang is slow-witted and ruined the commandant's plan. Commandant, please punish me." Yang Fan suddenly smiled. He quickly walked forward and held Huang Xuchang's arm to help him up. He said, "If it was leaked, then it was leaked. What's the big deal? Commander Huang, you don't need to blame yourself. This was a huge disaster," and he said it like it was nothing. Chapter 807. Early the next morning, Yang Fan and his party were ready to set off. The innkeeper, who did not know anything about them, leaned against the doorframe and secretly rejoiced that these monsters who could scare the hell out of his squad leader had finally left. Yang Fan and his party left Lushan County under the enthusiastic gaze of the innkeeper. Yang Fan and his party had appeared in Lushan County in order to attract the attention of the assassins. Although the plan to lure the snake out of its hole had failed and the news had been leaked, the assassins might not be able to learn of the latest news in time. Moreover, the assassins were not from just one faction. The assassins from other factions would receive the news even later, so they would still be surrounded and intercepted. The goal of Yang Fan and his party was to attract the attention of the assassins and create the conditions for the Prince of Luling to return to the capital. Thus, as long as the truth had not been discovered by the assassins from all factions, they would still be valuable and would still become assassination targets. For this reason, Yang Fan had very cautiously dispatched sentries to advance. He wanted to attract the firepower, not to actually run into the encirclement and lose his life. Not far from the city, news came from the outpost that there were nearly 100 horsemen guarding the main road leading to Longshan County. With so many people wielding sharp blades and riding on horseback, it was impossible to hide. It seemed that someone had reached the end of their patience and directly changed from assassins to bandits, intending to openly make a move. Yang Fan and his party immediately turned east, leaving the main road and fleeing into the wilderness. It was Li Daong who had set up a battle formation on the main road. He had gathered Wu Qingxi's men together, intending to fight to the death with Yang Fan. Unexpectedly, Yang Fan and his party avoided the battle and fled into the wilderness. Upon hearing the news, Li Daong immediately led his army to attack. As the two sides chased after each other, they reached the foot of the plateau, where more assassins of unknown origin rushed over and joined the battle. Yang Fan fought as he retreated southward, all the way to Yi County, where he fled to a high mountain at dusk. Fortunately, Yang Fan was not in the mood to fight, and the Prince of Luling was a fake. At the critical moment, the fake Prince of Luling simply abandoned the carriage and mounted a fine horse. So he escaped very quickly and did not cause too many casualties to the guards. On the hill, Li Guo limped towards Yang Fan. She was not good at horsemanship, so Lan Yiqing and the other female guards took turns to carry her. Her thighs were swollen, and it was difficult for her to walk, like a child learning how to walk. Li Guo looked worriedly at the pursuers at the foot of the mountain and said worriedly, "We are trapped here." Yang Fan smiled faintly and comforted him. "It's fine. Behind us is a continuous mountain range. As long as we hide inside, they won't be able to catch us, even if they send an army of tens of thousands." Hearing this, Li Guo felt a little more at ease. Zhang Shitong looked down the hill and asked worriedly, "Will they attack the mountain?" Yang Fan said in a deep voice, "I hope they will attack the mountain. There are 100 people at the foot of the mountain. If we can attract their attention here, hee." Yang Fan had not yet announced that there was a spy among them and that the real whereabouts of the Prince of Luling had already been revealed to the assassins. Therefore, these cavalrymen and internal guards all thought that their mission was still to act as live targets to attract the assassins, and thus deeply believed in Yang Fan's words. At the foot of the mountain, the two groups of assassins who had pursued the Prince of Luling all the way here gathered together and seemed to be reporting their identities to each other. After a brief pause, they cooperated and abandoned their horses, pressing up the mountain. The cavalrymen and internal guards who had escaped to the top of the mountain had just caught a breath. Seeing that the enemy was coming up the mountain, they had no choice but to brace themselves and prepare to defend. At this time, under the setting sun, several fast horses suddenly galloped over from afar and soon arrived at the foot of the mountain. After a while, the people watching the horses at the foot of the mountain suddenly shouted loudly, calling down the assassins who had just climbed halfway up the mountain. The cavalrymen and internal guards on the mountain looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what had happened. They saw the assassins descend the mountain, mount their horses, and gallop away in a cloud of dust. The cavalrymen and internal guards on the mountain couldn't help but be dumbfounded at this sight. Wei Yong scratched the back of his head and said in astonishment, "Strange, why are these assassins running away like their mother has died? Are they rushing back to attend the funeral?" Zhang Shidong suddenly came to his senses and cried out, "Not good! They must have found out the secret that the Prince of Luling is not here." Wei Yong glanced at him and said disdainfully, "What do you know? How could they possibly know?" Before he could finish, his expression changed. The two of them looked at each other and said in unison, "There's a spy!" Yang Fan said calmly, "That's right. There's a spy among us." His gaze suddenly swept across the crowd and saw that everyone was shocked. Yu Ziqing angrily said, "There's a spy among us? Who's the spy?" Everyone looked around in confusion, all of them revealing vigilant expressions. Some people had already subconsciously pulled away from the people around them. Yang Fan coldly looked at them and faintly smiled, saying, "There's indeed a spy, but fortunately," his gaze quickly swept across the faces of the crowd before he continued, "Fortunately, the spy has already fallen into my trap." Everyone looked at him in astonishment. Huang Xuchang couldn't help but ask, "Fallen into a trap? What kind of trap?" Yang Fan looked at him with a smile and asked, "What?" Commander Huang finally couldn't stand it anymore. Huang Xuchang was first startled and then flew into a rage. "What are you saying? Are you saying that I'm a spy?" I'm just asking the question that everyone wants to ask. Yang Fan gently applauded and said with a smile, "Wonderful. Truly wonderful. Commander Huang, it's really been hard on you. With your cultivation, I feel that you should be sent to the palace to be a performer. Perhaps you can even reach the position of high priest. Haha." "What the hell are you talking about?" Huang Xuchang was furious and wanted to charge at Yang Fan. Unexpectedly, the Prince of Luling, standing next to Yang Fan, suddenly appeared in front of him like a ghost. A cold light flashed in his palm, and a sharp dagger was pressed tightly against his heart. Huang Xuchang immediately didn't dare to move. Huang Xuchang was so furious that his chest heaved up and down as he shouted, "Yang Fan! Today, you have to make things clear to me. Today you have wrongly accused me, so this enmity between us is set in stone. If you don't give me an explanation, I won't let this matter rest." Yang Fan lightly said, "Explanation? Of course I have to give you an explanation." He looked at the hundreds of cavalrymen and inner guards who had gathered around him, and said, "I believe that everyone must be curious as to how I discovered the spy and how I uncovered him, right?" "That's right," Zhang Shidong said excitedly. "Lieutenant Yang, don't be mistaken. Commander Huang, he has been our brother for many years. How could he be a spy who betrayed everyone?" Yang Fan said, "I will give you a reason, but before I give it, let me first tell you how I discovered the spy and what I did afterwards." Yang Fan slowly walked a few steps on the hillside with his hands behind his back. The night breeze fluttered his clothes, making him look like a jade tree facing the wind. That day, we were ambushed at Gushui Town. It was a very remote place, and logically speaking, even if the assassins had enough manpower to plant eyes and ears there, it was impossible for them to arrange so many assassins there, and it was even more impossible for them to make arrangements in advance. But they did it, so how do you explain this? From then on, I knew that there must be a spy among us. If we don't catch this spy, we will definitely be unable to move an inch. But to catch him is easier said than done, so I racked my brains and came up with a plan to lure out the spy. Yang Fan looked at everyone and said with a heavy tone, "Not only did I lure out the spy, I also wanted to use this spy." Lan Yiqing said in a loud voice, "Lieutenant Yang, although I am one of the people who participated in this plan of yours, to be honest, I don't know much about your overall plan. You better explain it clearly." Yang Fan smiled and said, "All right. The first thing I did was to make the arrangements on the mountain, to disguise as a fake Prince of Luling and thus cover for the real Prince of Luling. But different from what you know, the one who has always been with us is not the fake Prince of Luling, but the real one." Everyone was at a loss when they heard this. Really? This person who is pointing a dagger at Commander Huang, he is the real Prince of Luling? When did the Prince of Luling become so skilled in martial arts? The skin on his face that was torn yesterday in the inn, and what's with his voice? Yang Fan said, "It's like this. After I found out that there was a spy, I suspected everyone except the inner guards. The reason why I didn't suspect the inner guards was because they already knew what we were going to do before we left the capital. If the spy was among them, it would have been impossible for us to bring back a living prince of Luling from Huangjuling." Li Gua gazed at Yang Fan, who was speaking with confidence and composure. An indescribable expression appeared in her eyes. She was one of the people who participated in the overall plan, and in her eyes, the wisdom of this man before her was far beyond her reach. She felt an impulse to crawl at his feet when facing someone who was far stronger than her. Yang Fan said, "So, I wanted to eliminate them one by one and find the spy. At that time, the one who was escorted by Miss Gao Ying and Commander Su Liang down the mountain was actually not the Prince of Luling, but this Miss Gu. I had instructed Miss Gao Ying to do her best to create an opportunity for Su Liang to be alone with Miss Gu, who was disguised as the Prince of Luling. If he was the spy, he would definitely make a move. In the end, Su Liang didn't make a move, so of course he wasn't the spy. That night, we spent the night in the forest. Because His Highness has nightmares, Princess didn't dare to sleep and could only carefully guard His Highness. Whenever there are nightmares, there will always be a reaction. At that time, Princess would wake His Highness up to prevent the spy from confirming that this was the real His Highness. After all, the spy could also be one of us. Commander Sue, who had been tested, was led by Miss Gao and Miss Gu. They followed the secret marks that I left behind and caught up to us. Princess took advantage of the night to invite the prince to follow and protect him. The direction they went was the forest that I had arranged for the guards to guard. It was in that forest that the real and fake prince were switched. Chapter 808. From then on, the one with us was the fake Wang Ye, while the real Wang Ye left with Miss Gao Ying and Brigade Commander Sue. At this time, the news that we arranged for Wang Ye to act alone had not spread, and it was much safer for Wang Ye to act alone than with us. After that, we arrived at Xiangqing, and Wang Ye, under the escort of Gao Ying and Brigade Commander Sue, passed through Liang Pass first. Because Wang Ye's health was not good and he couldn't take a carriage or a horse, he was too big of a target. So he hid after passing Liang Pass according to my previous arrangement. The Wang Ye you saw in the inn in Lushan County was still Miss Gu. After that, I allowed everyone to go out on the streets, giving the traitor a chance to send the news. I pretended to go with Miss Gu to buy the medicine needed for the disguise, but in fact, I was secretly watching the most suspicious people among you. At this point, Yang Fan smiled at Huang Xuchang, who had an ugly expression on his face, and teased. Of course, I told Commander Huang that he and the inner guards should keep an eye on the suspicious ones among you, while Miss Gu and I went to buy the disguise medicine. Brigade Commander Huang, you didn't expect that I was behind you when you were watching others and secretly informing your spies, right? Huang Xuchang angrily said, Bullshit! If I was a traitor, why would I risk my life in Gusui Town? I killed several assassins who rushed to Wang Ye's bedroom. Yang Fan leisurely said, Of course. At that time, you knew that Wang Ye had been moved by me, and only I was waiting in the room. Would you choose to expose your identity? They are not your blood brothers. In order to protect yourself, what can't you do? Huang Xuchang angrily stared at Yang Fan, and after a long time, suddenly smiled sinisterly. Smart! Really smart. I can't believe that you've been telling me everything and discussing it with me. In the end, even I've fallen into your scheme. Yang Fan, you're really smart. As soon as Huang Xuchang said this, there was no doubt that he admitted his identity. Everyone suddenly burst into an uproar. Yu Ziqin, Zhang Shidong, Wei Yong, and the others suddenly burst into an uproar. Tianyan, whose arm was cut to the bone and was likely to be disabled, even glared at Huang Xuchang with tears in his eyes. Hello! Hello! I called you Big Brother in vain, followed you through life and death. You beast in human form! Huang Xuchang suddenly shouted crazily, Shut up! I bathed in blood on the battlefield and went through life and death several times. So what? Am I not just a little brigade commander? As long as I complete this task, Wei Wang will promise to make me a general. Being a great general, bringing honor to your ancestors and bringing good fortune to your descendants. If you were me, would you be willing to say no to such benefits? What answered him was a heavy thump. Tianyan spat on his face. Yang Fan's eyes flashed, and he immediately asked, Are you someone sent by King Wei? Huang Xuchang sneered and said, Now that I've already fallen into your hands, you can do whatever you want of me. Why are you still asking so much? Yeah, I lost, what? Wang Ya on I, Wang Ya I. Ye I, Lu Commander, Ling Wang has sent on saying, Wang. On you I, Wang Ya has. Wang Ya, Wang is. They already know the truth. The Prince of Luling can't escape. Once he dies, all of you will die. On the road to the Yellow Springs, I'm just one step ahead. Everyone was furious. Wei Yong and Zhang Shidong were about to draw their sabers and cut him down when Yang Fan raised his hand to stop them. He sneered at Huang Xuchang. I'll have to disappoint you on this point. I still have to thank you for sending out the news, letting them know that the Prince of Luling is not with us. This way we can protect His Highness safely on his way back to the capital. Huang Xuchang was dumbfounded and his expression slowly changed. What do you mean? Yang Fan smiled. As I said, His Highness is not in good health and can't ride a carriage. He won't be able to travel long on horseback. So after passing Liang Pass, he went into hiding according to my arrangements. Yang Fan smiled and pointed at a cluster of buildings in the distance. His Highness is currently hiding in Yi County. We'll immediately go pick him up and travel day and night to Luoyang. By the time your people are still searching for traces of His Highness's party of 3, we'll have already safely arrived at Luoyang. You treacherous villain! Huang Xuchang's hopes were dashed, and he madly charged at Yang Fan. With a pop, Gu Zhuting, who was disguised as the Prince of Luling, stabbed him in the chest and kicked him into the air, sending him rolling down a grassy slope. Those who sold their brothers for riches and glory were only fit to be buried in the wilderness and fed on the bellies of wolves. Yang Fan sneered and said to Gu Zhuting, who had just wiped the blood off her saber, I'll have to trouble you next. Continue to disguise yourself as His Highness and show yourself in a few places from time to time. They should be completely convinced by Huang Xuchang's news, and with your occasional appearance, it should be enough to attract their attention. When they want to find you, just remove your disguise. I believe they won't be able to find you then. Gu Zhuting nodded. In that case, there's no need to have people follow me. Too many people will make it inconvenient to move around. When needed, I can hire 2 people to help me put on an act. This will only confuse them even more. Yang Fan pondered for a moment and then said with concern, Then be careful. Gu Zhuting nodded and smiled sweetly. The Prince of Luling's sweet smile sent a chill down everyone's spine. By the time Yang Fan's group arrived at Yi County, the city gates were already closed. Yang Fan's group was now ignored by dogs and was not worried that the assassins would cause trouble for them. Moreover, the louder they made a ruckus, the less suspicious the assassins would be. As a result, they changed their usual low profile and directly flashed the turtle talismans of the guards and guards, telling them to open the city gates and break into the city. Upon hearing the news, the county magistrate of Yi County hurriedly came to welcome them. The group didn't state the purpose of their visit and just stayed in the county's inn. After taking a hot bath and a hot meal, they relaxed to their heart's content. After entering the city, Yang Fan left with Lan Yiqing, Wei Yong, and Zhang Shidong. Led by Yang Fan, they shuttled through the alleys of the county. It was unknown what marks Gowing had left behind, but Yang Fan led them here and there until they finally found the Prince of Luling, Su Liang, and Gowing at the end of a small alley. Yang Fan brought the 3 of them back to the inn. Only then did everyone settle down. After breakfast the next morning, Yang Fan gathered everyone and solemnly said, Although we used a trick to deceive the assassins and eliminate the traitor, a long night is fraught with trouble. We have a heavy responsibility on our shoulders. As long as Your Highness doesn't arrive at the capital, we can't relax. I've already asked Yi County to prepare fast horses for us. All the injured will stay here and recuperate. The rest will follow me to escort Your Highness to the capital. Gowing cheerfully said, Good. It's a distance of 300 li from Yi County to Luoyang. If we rapidly march, we can travel 150 li in 1 day and 2 days to reach Luoyang. Wei Yong interrupted her. Commandant Gao, with His Highness's health, I'm afraid he won't be able to travel that fast. Gowing said, In that case, 100 li a day should be possible. If we travel 100 li a day, we can reach Luoyang by the 3rd day at the latest. Yang Fan shook his head. Do you think those assassins are idiots for us to march at such a rapid pace? Within 100 li, we'll still move ostentatiously and confuse them. We'll march this 100 li in 2 days. On the 3rd day, we'll pick up speed and travel at a speed of 150 li a day. On the 4th day, we'll reach Luoyang by noon. This way, Your Highness's body should be able to endure it. Moreover, the assassins won't be able to react in time. Even if they realize that they've been tricked, they won't be able to give chase. Everyone nodded in agreement. Prince Luling said gratefully, "For the sake of Li Xian's life, these warriors have gone through fire and water and risked their lives. Li Xian, I really don't know how to thank you." Li Guo smiled. "In the future, if father can win the favor of imperial grandmother and be entrusted with a great task, at that time, don't forget these warriors who have sworn to follow you to death." Prince Luling repeatedly said, "Of course, don't dare to forget." The group of people had decided on a plan and immediately set out. They arrived at Wuyang on the same day and Xiangqing on the next. They bypassed Mount Lu and Longxing counties and went straight from Jia City to Luoyang. Along the way, they moved slowly and deliberately showed off. They stayed one night in Wuyang and one night in Xiangqing. On the third day after leaving Xiangqing, they suddenly sped up and passed through Jia City as fast as lightning, heading straight for Ruzhou. In order to prevent others from figuring out their current whereabouts, they spent the night outside Ruzhou. The next morning, they suddenly entered the city and urgently replenished some food and water. They immediately left without stopping, bypassing Yingyang on the same night. At this time, on their left was Dragon Gate EK, on their right was Dangfeng, and in front of them was the eastern capital, Luoyang. With victory in sight, everyone was extremely excited. However, because they had been hurrying all the way, they were tired and their horses were tired. In addition, the moon and stars were dim tonight. One of the horses had already broken its leg due to exhaustion and the unclear path. It was really difficult for them to continue. Everyone gritted their teeth and continued for a while. Wei Yong couldn't help but say to Yang Fan, "Erlang, we really can't go on. Now that we have arrived here, there shouldn't be any more danger. Why don't we find a place to rest and continue tomorrow morning? We will reach Luoyang before noon." Yang Fan also urged his horse to move forward. The horse's legs were heavy as if it had sunk into a swamp. The horse's breathing was heavy and sweat was dripping down its mane. Hearing Wei Yong's words and seeing that everyone really couldn't move, he could only nod his head in agreement. Yang Fan looked around and saw that it was a vast wilderness. There was only a flash of light in front of them on the left. He wasn't sure if it was the Yi River or a tributary of the Luo River. He pointed with his horsewhip and said, "Let's spend the night there." Everyone was already exhausted. Hearing that they could finally rest, they cheered up and struggled to the riverside. Some of them fell off their horses and lay there motionless, not even bothering to take off their sleeping bags. Li Gui'er had been sitting in the carriage for a day, but her whole body was sore and numb. She wanted to jump on the ground and run 2 laps to relieve her fatigue. When the carriage stopped, she jumped down. Seeing Yang Fan standing beside the flowing water and looking ahead, she slowly walked to his side and said in a low voice, "You are really good." Yang Fan smiled and didn't say anything. Li Gui'er bit her lip and said gently, "My man is capable. My heart is very happy." Chapter 809. Yang Fan smiled and said, "I'm very tired, so let's rest early. The closer we are to Luoyang, the more we can't let our efforts go to waste. We'll set off when the sky is barely bright, and we'll reach Luoyang by noon." After saying that, Yang Fan crouched down to wash his face before walking away. Li Gui'er lightly curled her lips and muttered, "What's there to be proud of? When I become a princess, humph." Before she could finish, Li Gui'er had already turned around and walked toward the carriage. In front of the carriage, the Prince of Luling had just gotten off the carriage with the help of Su Liang and Gaoing. He was currently stretching his arms and legs. Yang Fan looked at them from afar and chuckled softly, an unfathomable expression on his face. In the deep of the night, the sleeping Wei Yong suddenly felt his heart palpitate. Opening his eyes, he saw a black figure squatting in front of him. Startled, Wei Yong reached out to touch the steel saber under his pillow, but that person stopped him and shouted, "It's me!" Startled, Wei Yong exclaimed, "Erlang!" Looking around, it was still dark and the sky was still dark. Wei Yong asked, What are you doing in front of me instead of sleeping? Yang Fan smiled and said, It won't be too late to sleep somewhere else. Wake up now. Bewildered, Wei Yong sat up. Yang Fan had already walked away and was patting the second person awake. Originally, after a day's journey, everyone was extremely tired. At this time, their bodies had not yet recovered and were sore all over. But they were woken up by Yang Fan one by one. Everyone was a little baffled. Yang Fan said, Let's leave this place immediately and sleep somewhere else. Li Gui'er opened her sleepy eyes and poked her head out of the carriage, grumbling, Why do we have to leave all of a sudden? Yang Fan didn't reply, only urging everyone to saddle up their horses and carriages and get ready to move. About half an hour later, everyone was finally ready. Yang Fan said, Follow closely, we're leaving now. No one knew where he was going, so they could only follow him. Yang Fan walked along the riverbank. After walking for about 2 miles, the sky had already begun to brighten. A small bridge appeared in front of him. The bridge was very narrow, only allowing 1 person and 1 horse to cross. Yang Fan smiled and said, It's here. Abandon the carriage and cross the river. Zhang Shidong was startled. Lieutenant, crossing the river is the road to Dragon's Gate. That's right, Yang Fan said. Let's go back through Dragon Gate. Wang Ye is returning to the capital. It's a good omen. Wei Yong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A good omen? I say, Erlang, you still have the mood to be so carefree at this time. We have to walk dozens of miles from here to the Dragon Gate. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly felt 2 hard things pressing against his waist. When he turned around, he saw Gao Ying and Lan Yiqing standing behind him, smiling at him, but their eyes were cold as ice. The smile on Wei Yong's face froze. The group crossed the bridge, and Yang Fan ordered, Destroy the bridge completely. Immediately, 200 cavalry rushed forward and completely destroyed the small bridge that the villagers had built to cross the river. Many people hadn't noticed Wei Yong's abnormality. Wei Yong stood there stiffly and didn't have any reaction. He only used a frightening gaze to follow Yang Fan slowly. The torches were like spots of starlight, dancing in the distant night sky as they got closer and closer. Not only were there torches on the road from Luoyang, there was also a large group of torches from Inyang. The 2 groups were getting closer and closer, and it was obvious that they were galloping. Li Daong led his men and was out of breath from running. When he saw a group of people coming from afar, he immediately raised his guard and ordered his subordinates to be on guard. The 2 groups stopped a stone's throw away and shouted a few words from afar. Only then did he realize that it was the people who were coming from Luoyang to provide support. Li Daong was relieved and led his men to continue forward. At the same time, he was secretly puzzled. The 2 groups had already met, but he still hadn't seen Yang Fan's group. Could it be that they had grown wings and flown into the sky? If they were to stop in the forest halfway, their actions would probably be seen by them and they would alert the enemy. Seeing that the 2 groups were about to meet, Li Daong suddenly pulled on the reins and bent down to look at the ground. Light up! Li Daong ordered. A few of the cavalry lowered their torches and saw a belt on the ground. It was pointing diagonally at the grass by the side of the road. Li Daong revealed a sinister smile and shouted, Go down and search along the river bank for me. After Li Daong finished speaking, many of the wolf-like imperial guards rushed down the road while Li Daong quickly rode to meet the people on the other side. Brother Zheng. Li Daong cupped his hands at the person coming up to meet him. This person was tall and had broad shoulders, fierce eyebrows, and leopard-like eyes. He looked very fierce, and his name was Zhang Yu. He was also one of Wu Sanxi's fierce generals. Zhang Yu cupped his hands at him and returned the greeting, Brother Li! Li Daong said, Your Highness received this little brother's messenger pigeon? Zhang Yu said, I received it. This Yang Fan is too cunning. He mixed the truth with the lies and made us exhausted. His granny. But don't worry. This time he definitely won't be able to enter Luoyang. Not only did your highness send me here, but he also ordered people to guard the city gates. He won't let them take a single step in." Just as he was speaking, there was a loud shout from the riverside. Li Daong and Zheng Yu quickly rode their horses to the riverside. They saw that the ground was a mess and there were many sleeping bags that they didn't have time to put away. Li Daong said they must have rested here last night. They shouldn't have gone far. Zheng Yu excitedly said, "Chase, once this merit is made, you and I will enjoy endless riches and honor in our lives." There were weeds and footprints on the riverside. These people searched carefully and followed the traces all the way. Soon, they arrived at the small bridge. At this time, the sky was already bright. Although the sun had not risen from the horizon, it was early summer, and the earth was already bright. Their torches had been extinguished, and only wisps of smoke were still curling up from the torches. These people held the smoking torches and stared at the broken bridge in front of them. Zhang Yu gritted his teeth and said, "He's really as cunning as a ghost and as cunning as a fox. This bastard went to Dragon Gate." Li Daong said with a gloomy face, "No matter how cunning he is, he won't be able to enter Luoyang." Brother Zheng immediately sent a message back. "I will bring people to find a way to cross the river. Let's let that person die on Dragon Gate Mountain." Dragon Gate, hot spring supervisor. Yang Fan soaked in the hot spring for a full hour. His fatigue was washed away. He felt refreshed and refreshed. Yang Fan came out in a bathrobe. As soon as he saw Xue Tangqing waiting there, he smiled and nodded. "Xue Tangqing, thank you for your trouble." Xue Tangqing, who was dressed in a green robe, had a hooked nose, 2 fleshy cheeks, and a mustache, quickly said to his old superior, "Captain is too polite. Captain, you brought hundreds of cavalry and internal guards here in a hurry. Is there something important?" Yang Fan glanced at him and said with a deep meaning, "It's not that I don't want to tell you. It's just that it's better for Xue Tangqing not to know about this matter." Xue Tangqing's heart skipped a beat and he quickly shut his mouth. Yang Fan said, "The people I brought with me are the 100 cavalry and the inner guards. This time they left the palace on an imperial edict. After a long and arduous journey, it was not easy for us to return to the capital. Mayor Xue Tangqing, please prepare some fine wine and food for them. As for the Sinong Gnome Temple, I will inform them." Xue Tangqing quickly said, "No need to tell me. Your humble officer has already arranged it." Feeling uneasy, Xue Tangqing casually said a few words and excused himself. After changing his clothes, Yang Fan went to the outer room. He saw Wei Yong sitting at the table in a daze, like a wooden statue. Gao Ying and Lan Yiqing stood on his left and right, still standing behind him. As soon as he saw Yang Fan come in, Wei Yong slowly raised his head and looked at him with a somewhat sluggish gaze. Yang Fan said to Gao Ying and Lan Yiqing in a friendly manner, "You 2 ladies have worked hard. Go take a bath and rest." Gao Ying pouted her lips at Wei Yong. Yang Fan smiled and said, "No problem." The 2 ladies also believed that with Yang Fan's skill, Wei Yong will not be able to do anything to him. Thus they complied and left. Yang Fan slowly sat down in front of Wei Yong. A difficult smile slowly appeared on Wei Yong's face. "How did you discover me?" he asked quietly. Yang Fan said, "Because you were too careless after Commander Huang's death. We stopped at Wuyang City and Xiangqing City for a night each. You didn't forget to send a message to both places. It's hard for me not to discover you." Wei Yong sighed softly and silently closed his eyes. Yang Fan looked at him with a pained expression. "Brother Wei, I really don't want to see our old friends end up like this." Wei Yong said in a stupefied voice, "I never thought that the struggle for the world would cause us brothers to meet on the battlefield. When I accepted King Liang's benefits, I never thought that this day would come. Actually, I've only accepted benefits from King Liang all this time. I haven't done anything else. This time, I didn't know what you were after when you brought us south. I didn't contact King Liang either. It was only when something happened in Fangling and I was thrown into prison that I learned her goal. Ever since I joined King Liang's side, I became one of King Liang's people. I couldn't just watch him fall. At that time, I didn't have any way to contact King Liang, so I took the risk of using a military relay station to send a message to the capital. Fortunately, no one made things difficult for them when they heard that it was a letter from the Liang Manor. Only after that did I receive an order from King Liang on the way back, and I obtained a way to contact others. Yang Fan said sadly, "One wrong step, and I became a thief in the end." Wei Yang's face twitched a few times. He became agitated. "Thief? Who's a thief? If I succeed, I'll be a king. If I fail, I'll be a thief." Yang Fan shook his head. "Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together." Wei Yong sneered. "How do you know that your path is correct? Huang Xuchang is a brigade marshal, and his rank is higher than mine. Wasn't he bribed by King Wei in the end?" Yang Fan fell silent for a moment. Then he said slowly, "Brigade Marshal Huang is not a traitor." Wei Yong's body trembled. His eyes widened in shock. His voice trembled as he said, What did you say?" Yang Fan raised his voice and enunciated every word clearly. "I said Huang Xuchang is not a traitor." Wei Yong stared at Yang Fan as if he had seen a ghost. Yang Fan said, "What I told you on the mountain in Yi County was almost all true, including the fact that I was spying on Brigade Marshal Huang. Only one thing was false, and that was that I discovered that Brigade Marshal Huang was a traitor. You hid it very well, very well. I tried to bait you again and again, but I couldn't fish you out. But with a traitor by your side, we couldn't complete our mission. That was why, after the plan to lure the snake out of its hole failed, I discussed it with Brigade Marshal Huang and set up a trap. I already found out that the person staying in the inn is King Liang's man." You don't need to ask me how I know. Most of the local officials are fence-sitters. They don't dare to go too far in any aspect, so they want to leave a way out for themselves. In any case, I know that King Liang has already sent someone to stay in the inn. Why is he staying there? To wait for that traitor, of course. That's why I asked Brigade Marshal Huang to pretend to be King Wei Qingxi's spy." Wei Yong sneered. "You really dare to take such a risk? Aren't you afraid that we'll find something amiss when we confront each other?" Yang Fan raised his eyebrows. "Are King Liang and King Wei on good terms? Are they a pair of scheming enemies? Or are they brothers in love?" Wei Yong was immediately at a loss for words. Yang Fan continued, "Those maidservants of the internal guards are too impatient. Ever since they found out that there was a traitor, they've been looking at people with strange expressions. I reckon that this cunning traitor has long since sensed that I'm already suspicious. This act of mine will make the traitor think that he's not the only traitor. Once we get rid of this traitor, he will no longer be suspected. We'll kill the traitor Huang Xuchang, then let Miss Gu leave first. She can continue to strut around as the Prince of Luling, while we escort the real Prince of Luling back to Luoyang. Ha! This plan was meant for you, the traitor. Actually, the Prince of Luling we picked up in Yi County was a fake. It was Miss Gu, who arrived at Yi County before us." Wei Yong's face twitched a few times. It was hard to tell whether he was crying or laughing. Yang Fan said, "After that, everyone thought that the traitor had been eliminated, and the traitor let down his guard. I knew that this traitor would definitely spread the news, and sure enough, I found you. They thought that I was escorting the real Prince of Luling this time, so they threw everything aside to chase after me. That way, the real Prince of Luling would be able to enter Luoyang safely." Wei Yong's face froze for a long time before he slowly said, "So you couldn't find the traitor, so you used him. I have been used by you all this time?" Yang Fan looked at him sympathetically and nodded. "That's right. The dead Commander Huang also left after we left to escort the real prince back to Luoyang. Everyone thought that the prince was with me, and everyone thought that Commander Huang was already dead. A dead man was protecting a non-existent man, so I believed that no one would bother him along the way. Wei Yong stammered, but I saw Miss Gu kill Huang Xuchang with my own eyes. With a flick of his wrist, Yang Fan took out a sharp dagger from his sleeve. Yang Fan used his fingertip to lightly touch the tip of the dagger, and the blade shrank back and forth. With flagging interest, Yang Fan said, "It's just a small toy. If the hilt is first filled with blood, it'll look even more like it. On the way to Fangzhou, I learned it from that old man who plays with illusions. What do you think?" Yang Fan's thumb lightly flicked the hilt, and the dagger fell on the table. With a bang, the end of the dagger vibrated. Yang Fan said, "Only after flipping the switch can the dagger really kill." Wei Yong slowly stretched out his hand and pulled out the dagger. He slowly pointed the tip of the dagger at his heart, just like how Gu Zhuting had pressed the dagger against Huang Xuchang's chest on Yi County's mountain. He knew that regardless of whether or not Yang Fan felt pity for him, he would not let him off today, whether it was because of those dead cavalrymen and inner guards, or because of the importance of this matter. Since Yang Fan had told him the answer to this riddle before the Prince of Luling had returned to the capital, he could only die. Since he could only die, why should he beg for mercy? With a force of his wrist, the sharp dagger pierced into his heart. Wei Yong only let out a soft hum like a sigh. Chapter 810. Li Deong saw that the river was not very wide and the bridge was still there, so he thought it would be easy to cross the river. Unexpectedly, he found some trees and tried to build a bridge, but he failed again and again. If they were to cross the river on foot with their skills, most of them would be able to cross, but it would be difficult for the horses. One of Li Daiyong's subordinates was a brother. Usually everybody called him Xiaowa. He was thin, with a quick-witted look on his face. Seeing this situation, he said, "Dage, my grandmother said that anyone with 4 legs can swim. Let's ride a horse and swim across." Li Daiyong looked at the surging river, pulled his beard, and said, "You try." Xiao Wu immediately mounted the horse, kicked the horse's belly with both legs, and shouted, "Go! Go!" The horse was very obedient and jumped into the river. After walking for a while, its whole body sank into the water and then floated up again. Xiao Wu was delighted. "Ha ha! Big brother, look, my grandmother was right. It's really passable. Go, 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 whoa, whoa." Though the channel was not wide, the water was rapid and deep. Xiao Wu's horse thrashed forward a few times, but it had no feet to stand on and was carried downstream by the rapid current. Xiao Wu reined in the reins and stirred the stirrups, which made the horse so agitated that it nearly threw him off its back. Xiao Wu had no choice but to give up struggling. He grabbed the horse's neck with both hands and shouted, "Big brother, help!" Li Daiyong was so angry that his eyes turned white. The brothers next to him quickly untied their belts, and by the time the belts were connected to a long rope, Xiao Wu had already floated up and down the river. Li Daiyong unhappily ordered one of his men to take the rope made from the belts and ride down the river. Then he led 8 or 9 of his brothers who were holding up their pants and looked at the rolling river in a daze. They did not know how to build a bridge, so they had no choice but to send people to a nearby village to hire people. Li Daiyong anxiously stood guard at the bridgehead. After Zhang Yu learned that Yang Fan and the others had crossed the river, he immediately turned back and ran all the way. When he was about to reach Luoyang, there was a fork in the road ahead. There was a stone bridge on the road, which led to the direction of Dragon Gate. Zhang Yu did not think about it and led his men down that road. He only ordered 2 people to rush back to Luoyang and warn his companions who were guarding the city gate. There was only one road from Luoyang to EK Dragon Gate. On both sides of the road, there were all kinds of green crops, some of which were as tall as the waist, and some of which were as low as the knees. Zhang Yu and the others ran all the way to EK, but they did not see Yang Fan and the others along the way. Seeing that there were already people working in the fields, they asked the farmer about it. The farmer was standing in the field with a hoe in his hand. Listening to their explanation, he nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, there is a group of people. They look like they are in a hurry. They look very distressed. They are running towards the mountains." "Thief!" Zhang Yu sneered, whipped his horse, and charged into the mountains. It was spring now, and there were many pilgrims coming in and out of the mountains. In fact, Wu Zetian worshipped Buddha, and there were countless temples in Luoyang. However, some believers always felt that the more devout they walked, the more efficacious the bodhisattva built in the mountains. The temples in the city smelled of money, so there was a constant flow of pilgrims coming to Dragon Gate. Some of them came late and stayed in the temples until the next day. When Zhang Yu and the others entered the mountains, they saw some pilgrims coming out of the mountains one after another. Zhang Yu asked these people again. The target of Yang Fan and the others was too obvious and could not be hidden. Before these pilgrims went down the mountain, they had already seen them halfway up the mountain. Listening to the inquiry of this group of rich people in fresh clothes and furious horses, the pilgrims kindly pointed out that the first batch of pilgrims on horseback went around to the back of the mountain. Behind the mountain was Hot Spring Mountain, the territory of the Hot Spring supervisor. It was the forbidden area of the royal family, and ordinary people could not go there. Zhang Yu thought that he was doing things for Liang Wangu, and in the entire court, other than the emperor, their Wangya was the most powerful. He did not care, and led his men and horses to kill their way to Hot Spring Mountain. Zhang Yu reined in his horse at the bottom of the winding stone path, and raised his head to look up. He heard the sound of horses neighing coming from the top of the mountain. Zhang Yu sneered and said, "Dismount, go up the mountain." The group dismounted one after another, tied their horses to the top of the mountain, pulled out their blades, and aggressively climbed up the mountain along the bluestone path. Just as they climbed to the front of the first memorial arch, they heard a loud shout in front of them. From behind the memorial arch, a group of people jumped out with a whooshing sound. These people were agile, and their movements were agile. Although the direction they jumped out from was different, the way they jumped out was also different. Some flashed, some jumped, some somersaulted in the air, but when they stood in a straight line. Just this uniformity was enough to make people look at them in a new light. Zhang Yu was startled. He saw that these people were all wearing gray robes, bamboo hats on their heads, straw sandals on their feet, and leggings on their trousers. In their hands was a black whistle stick. The tip of the stick pointed to the ground. His gaze followed the tip of the stick, and thus he could only see a little bit of their chin. Zhang Yu shouted, "Who are you people?" One of the gray-robed men said in a deep voice, "The forbidden area of the royal family. What is your intention?" Zhang Yu was at the foot of the emperor, so of course he could not admit his identity. Besides, they were used to being arrogant and always kept their word. How could they let others interrogate them about their origins? If they did not agree with each other, they would immediately give the order to attack. Since they could not go up the mountain smoothly, then they would fight. After this exchange, Zhang Yu knew the origin of this group of people. When they fought, some of the gray-robed men had their bamboo hats knocked off, revealing a big bald head with 2 lines of scars on the top of his head. Only then did Zhang Yu know that these people were martial monks from an unknown temple on Dragon Gate Mountain. This group of bald donkeys had nothing to do every day. When they were full, they chanted scriptures and treated it as breathing practice. The rest of the time, they waved their spears, played with sticks, and practiced their fists and feet. Each of them was as strong as iron, and their chi and blood were extremely strong. When they fought, they could fight better than these Jianghu, people who prided themselves on their fighting skills. The most hateful thing was that this group of bald donkeys had helpers. Seeing that they had the advantage in numbers, one of the monks let out a shout, and a group of martial monks seemed to jump out of the thicket. Another group of martial monks, carrying heavy black sticks, rushed out and joined the battle. One shouted senior brother, another called junior brother, and the other brandished their sticks like a wheel. Zhang Yu and his group were beaten until their heads were bleeding, and their noses were bruised and swollen. They could not resist anymore and could only retreat down the mountain while fighting. When Zhang Yu reached the foot of the mountain, the group of martial monks did not chase after him. In an instant, they disappeared into the forest. Zhang Yu was angry and hateful. Just as he was feeling helpless, another group of people on horses came from afar. The group of people who had just arrived was Li Daong and his group. They found the villagers to help build a bridge. Since there was a handsome reward and the bridge was convenient for the villagers to travel, they naturally worked very hard. When the simple bridge was hurriedly built, Li Daong and his group led their horses carefully across the river and then went straight to Dragon Gate. They asked along the way and arrived at the foot of Hot Spring Mountain. They just happened to see Jingyu and his group coming down the mountain with their faces covered in dirt. Some were limping. Some had bloody noses and swollen faces, as if they had just been beaten up. Li Daong hurriedly went up to ask Jingyu, and immediately became angry. He said fiercely, "This group of bald donkeys must be martial monks from several monasteries on the mountain. Just one monastery can't gather so many people. Damn it, they are actually standing together with Yang Fan against us. Let's go, now that we have joined forces. Let's go up the mountain." Zhang Yu said with lingering fear, We can't. We don't know how many people there are in that group of bald donkeys. When they fight, it's like they are playing around. They also have the geographical advantage and look down on us. It's not that I look down on you, but even if you and I join forces, it will be difficult for us to win against them. Li Daong said angrily, "So what? Are we going to just watch them stay on the mountain?" Zhang Yu sneered and said, "As long as he doesn't enter the capital to see the emperor, it can't be considered settled. Don't worry, I have already sent someone back to report. When His Highness gets the news, he will definitely make a decision. You and I will guard the foot of the mountain and not let them escape. As for other matters, we will wait for His Highness to arrive before making a decision." Li Daong had no choice but to rest at the foot of the mountain with him. On the mountain, Yang Fan saw Zhang Yu and his group retreating down the mountain in a sorry state. He put his palms together and said to an old monk next to him, "Thank you for your help, Zen Master." This monk was about 60 years old. His face was ruddy and his skin was without wrinkles. However, the corners of his eyes were slightly loose and he had a beard on his chin. He was wearing a yellow robe and a pair of straw sandals. He was not wearing a kasaya, a monk's hat, or prayer beads. He was only holding a string of prayer beads in his hand. He was dressed casually in a meditation room. This old monk was F.A. Zhang. He was one of the 10 eminent monks of Rodu who created the great cloud scripture and was given a purple kasaya by Wu Zetian. He was the leader of the various monasteries in Yeek Dragon Gate. F.A. Zhang smiled and said, "Benefactor has received the emperor's secret edict and is accompanied by hundreds of cavalry and internal guards. What you are doing is naturally proper. This group of people acted openly and did not dare to reveal their identity. You can imagine what they are doing. The various monasteries in Dragon Gate are often rewarded with incense oil by the royal family. This hot spring mountain is a forbidden area for the royal family. Since we are neighbors, how can we just stand by and watch?" However, F.A. Zheng glanced at Yang Fan and said, "Why these people came and why Benefactor Yang is guarding? Shouldn't this old monk know?" Yang Fan pondered for a moment and said, "This disciple's trip is to protect a noble person." F.A. Zheng's eyes lit up, but his voice was still calm. "How noble?" Yang Fan smiled and asked, "Which Buddha is the most noble in Buddhism?" F.A. Zheng smiled and said, "Haha, since you have become a Buddha, you have achieved perfection. Since you have achieved perfection, there is naturally no distinction between nobility and inferiority. Why would there be a ranking?" Yang Fan smiled and said, "Zen Master, please don't argue with me. Between Buddhas, even if there is no distinction between nobility and inferiority, there must be a ranking, right? Let me put it this way. the Buddha of the past, the Buddha of the present, and the Buddha of the future, which Zen master respects the most. F.A. Zheng said, "This old monk lives in the present, and the one I respect the most is the Buddha of the present." Yang Fan said, "If that's the case, then the one I am protecting is the Buddha of the future." He slowly turned towards the direction of Luoyang and said lightly, "The Buddha of the present is there!" The prayer beads that F.A. Zhang was twirling suddenly stopped. After pausing for a moment, he resumed twirling, but at a much faster speed. Yang Fan said seriously, "Zen Master, do you have any regrets?" F.A. Zheng shook his head gently and said, "Benefactor Yang is carrying the imperial edict. This old monk is protecting the Tao. What is there to regret? It's just that," he frowned slightly and said, "it's just that since this noble person is so noble, this old monk's cultivation is limited. I'm afraid I can't protect him for long." Yang Fan chuckled and said, "Zen Master, don't worry. This disciple has long expected that the journey will be difficult and dangerous. To be able to arrive here safely is already somewhat beyond my expectations. However, since I'm here, then the Skanda Temple, the demigods, and 8 divisions and the guardians of the various factions should also be here." Chapter 8:11. Yang Fan had gone to Fong Province to pick up the Prince of Luling. At first, it was a huge secret that no one in the capital knew about. When Wei Yong sent back the news, Wu Sansi and Wu Yizong found out. When Brigade Commander Jia discovered the Prince of Luling's disappearance on the Yellow Bamboo Ridge, Wu Qingxi found out as well, followed by his strategist Zhang Jiafu. Then Wu Qingxi called for a clan assembly, so everyone in the Wu clan knew about it. These people had relatives, friends, trusted aides, and subordinates. At this time, the secret was no longer a secret. The Wu brothers wanted to mobilize the entire Wu clan's power to deal with the Prince of Luling, so they announced the news to the Wu clansmen. These clansmen were a mix of good and bad, and many of them were profligate, so it was very difficult for them to keep the secret. Moreover, the assassins sent by the Wu brothers wanted to find traces of Yang Fan's group, but relying on their own strength was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Although they had an informant by Yang Fan's side, if they couldn't grasp Yang Fan's movements in time, it would be too late by the time the information arrived. Therefore, they had to borrow the local powers, and these local powers, whether they were loyal to the Wu clan, inclined to the Wu clan, or forced to submit to the Wu clan, all of them had their own factions and friends. Thus, when they found out about this, it meant that their small group also knew about it. The current situation was that this matter had already become an open secret. In the bureaucracy, as long as they had some connections, everyone knew about it. Only the wise and far-sighted Wu, Zhou Emperor, was still in the dark. Because she lived deep in the palace, no one told her about this. Those who wanted to kill the Prince of Luling wouldn't say anything, and those who wanted to protect him couldn't say anything. Evidence? No, it was only hearsay. Moreover, the assassins had already been sent. Even if Wu Zetian believed it, it was too far for her to do anything. The Prince of Luling's life was no longer dependent on the major figures in the capital. The result would be that he would completely expose himself and break off all relations with the Wu clan. If that happened, if the Prince of Luling really died, he wouldn't be far from it either. Even if the Prince of Luling managed to make it to the capital alive, he would still have a few years to live as a humble crown prince. During this period of time, he still wouldn't be able to protect them from the Wu clan's crazy counterattack. They would not do meaningless things. None of these people in the officialdom were hot-blooded people who did things regardless of the consequences. Even if everyone knew about this battle, it could only be carried out below the stage. But below the stage, they could only be a group of anxious spectators. When this matter had already begun, the fate of the nation and its future would be decided by those ordinary people who were bathed in blood and killing each other, and not by these high-ranking officials. However, they still sent out eyes and ears. They needed to know first-hand information in time so that they could respond in time. Therefore, The news that Yang Fan had protected the Prince of Luling and successfully fought his way out of the encirclement and escaped to Dragon's Gate Mountain was only known to them a little later than Wu Sanxi and Wu Qingxi. The Prince of Luling was already in the capital, at the feet of the Son of Heaven, so they had a place to use their skills. The various gods and Buddhas immediately began to move. The officials of the Luling sect were burning with anxiety. They were like a group of dragons without a leader. The leader of their sect, Di Renjia, was suffering from a serious illness. Sometimes he was lucid, sometimes he was muddle-headed, and he was no longer able to manage matters. But without Di Renjia, no one had the prestige or the qualifications to lead them and make a decision that would decide the future of all of them. Helpless, they could only rush to Prime Minister Di's estate. No matter what, they had to get an idea or a decision from this imperial elder. The officials of the Prince of Xiang's faction were in extreme conflict. On one hand, the Prince of Luling had clearly returned to the capital to replace the Prince of Xiang. Everyone could see this. In his years in the Eastern Palace, the Prince of Xiang had suffered the open and hidden attacks of the Wu clan. The Prince of Xiang's crown princess and secondary concubine had both died because of the schemes of the Wu clan, and the Prince of Xiang's sons had been born from the crown princess and secondary concubine who had died unjustly. The hatred between the two sides could no longer be resolved. Wu Zetian's decision to appoint a descendant of the Li clan as heir apparent had been forced by the circumstances and the will of the people. In this case, her best choice could only be the Prince of Luling in the distant Fang province. She was not willing to let the Prince of Xiang ascend the throne. Once the Prince of Xiang ascended to the throne, he would very likely become the gravedigger of the Wu clan. But if the Prince of Luling really did die on the road, once Wu Zetian hardened her heart and insisted on appointing a member of the Wu clan as heir apparent, even if the world fell into chaos, what would happen then? Perhaps after Wu Zetian's death, there would be a nationwide war to decide who the country belonged to. Moreover, it was fine if the Prince of Luling had not yet arrived at the capital. It was fine to feign ignorance and impotence, but now that he was at Dragon's Gate Mountain, if they did not do anything, wouldn't they be scorned by the people of the world? Thus, Yao Chong, Wei Jigu, and the others hesitantly wanted to help the Prince of Luling return to the city. But a large number of officials in the Prince of Xiang's faction opposed this. They believed that if the Prince of Luling returned to the capital alive, he would assuredly be made crown prince. The Prince of Luling was the Prince of Xiang's elder brother and also a descendant of Li Tang, so the people of the world did not care. As long as he lived, the Prince of Xiang would never have a chance to aspire to the throne, nor would he have any reason to rebel against his imperial brother. The throne would essentially be handed over to the Prince of Luling. But if the Prince of Luling died, the Prince of Xiang would at least have a 50-50 chance of retaining his position as crown prince. Even if Wu Zetian was determined to make a nephew of the Wu clan crown prince, once Wu Zetian died, the Prince of Xiang could use the hearts of the people and Li Tang's prestige to rebel against the new emperor, giving him a 50-50 chance of recapturing the empire. Based on this calculation, if the Prince of Luling died, the Prince of Xiang would have a 75% chance of ascending to the throne. If the Prince of Luling lived, the Prince of Xiang would not even have a 10% chance. This argument had a great deal of support in the Prince of Xiang's faction. Although Yao Chong and Wei Jigu were the leaders of this faction, they did not dare to go against the will of the majority, so the matter was dragged on. But there was another faction in the capital that was paying close attention to this matter, the Taiping party. Princess Taiping did not care which of her brothers became emperor. As long as they were descendants of Li Tang, she would support them. She had long ago learned that Yang Fan had secretly welcomed the Prince of Luling back to the capital, and that the two Wu clans had mobilized all their forces to stop him. Although she was burning with anxiety, she could do nothing at the time. Even if she charged into the palace and told the truth to the emperor would not have enough time to think of a countermeasure. And if the Prince of Luling died on his way back, she would have to face the all-out counterattack of the Wu clan. If she waited patiently, once the Prince of Luling really did die, she could still use the dual opportunities of Princess Li Tang and the Wu clan's daughter-in-law to create as many opportunities as possible for her brother, the Prince of Xiang. After weighing the pros and cons, Princess Taiping could only clench her teeth and endure. But now that Yang Fan had escorted the Prince of Luling to the capital, she could no longer endure it. Her elder brother was on Dragon Gate Mountain, and so was her lover. If she acted now, there was a high chance that she could save them. Thus, Princess Taiping immediately dispatched all her people to EK and the Dragon Gate. Meanwhile, she quickly rode to the imperial palace to see the emperor. The horse was waiting outside the palace gate. Once she saw the empress, she would immediately go to the Dragon Gate. By this time, the Luling clique had already arrived at Prime Minister Di's estate. Di Renjie was sleeping, his son attending to him by his bed. Upon hearing the purpose of these officials, he knew that the matter was urgent and could only wake his father. Di Renjie was still relatively clear-headed, and when he heard these officials explain their purpose, he immediately grew anxious. He had no time to reprimand these officials for being muddle-headed. He immediately had his family carry a soft sedan chair to Dragon Gate Mountain. The protector had come, so the demon had naturally come as well. Wu Sanxi rose early in the morning. When he heard that the Prince of Luling had been found on the road from Yingyang to Luoyang, he was both surprised and delighted. He was surprised that the Prince of Luling was truly lucky. Even after being surrounded and intercepted, he had still managed to reach the vicinity of Luoyang. He was delighted that now that his tracks had been found, this distance was like the distance between heaven and earth. As long as he could kill him first, what was done could not be undone. No matter how angry his aunt was, there was nothing she could do. Wu Sanxi immediately arranged for his men to strengthen the surveillance on the road from EK to Luoyang, while he himself rode to the Dragon Gate. Before leaving, Wu Sanxi sent someone to deliver a message to Wu Qingxi as well. As the saying goes, the law does not punish the masses. If he dragged this sickly man along, he would have more confidence in dealing with his aunt's displeasure. When his men arrived at King Wei's mansion, they found nothing. It turned out that Wu Qingxi had already received the news and was rushing to the Dragon Gate in a carriage. The two brothers were of one mind this time. Before leaving, Wu Qingxi also sent someone to deliver a message to him, but the two messengers found nothing. Wu Qingxi, on the other hand, ran into Wu Sanxi along the way. Wu Qingxi was lying sickly in the carriage. The jolting of the carriage made him drowsy, until a guard's cry came from outside, "Someone is coming!" "Ah, it's King Liang's flag." When Wu Qingxi heard this, he immediately called for his men to stop the carriage. Wu Sanxi stopped in front of the carriage and asked curiously, "King Wei? I even sent someone to your mansion to send a message, so you've already received the news." Wu Qingxi was so agitated that his face turned red. First he let out a heart-wrenching cough, then said, while gasping for breath, "Reconsider! You must reach the Dragon Gate as soon as possible. You don't have to worry too much. Just charge up the mountain and kill Luling. As long as he's dead, cough, 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 in front of Aunt, it's up to you and me to talk. What's done can't be undone, and Aunt can't, cough, cough, do anything. Cough, cough, cough." Wu Sanxi cursed in his heart. "You've already become like this. I'm afraid you'll cough to death on the road before Li Xian dies. Yet you're still thinking about the throne." However, he put on a smile and comforted him. "Don't worry. The enemy is right in front of us. You and I will work together. No matter what, we can't let the Wu Empire fall into the hands of outsiders." Wu Qingxi's eyes glistened with tears. He said emotionally, "Reconsider. The future of the Wu clan is in your hands." Wu Sanxi felt like vomiting, but he replied emotionally, "Don't worry, elder brother. I'll be going now." Wu Sanxi whipped his horse and led a group of guards towards the Dragon Gate like a gust of wind. The horse's hooves kicked up a cloud of dust, and Wu Qingxi coughed violently again. Fortunately, he didn't choke to death. Chapter 812. Yao Chong and Wei Jigu stood with their hands behind their backs, their faces gloomy. Ever since Di Renjie became seriously ill, too many official duties had been placed on them. Their desks were now full of documents, but neither of them was in the mood to deal with them. Because of the depressing atmosphere in the hall, the eunuchs stayed far away from the door. They didn't know why the two prime ministers were so preoccupied. If they were not careful, they might ruin their plans. Outside the hall, Zhao Jianing of the Hall of Governmental Affairs walked in with hurried steps. The courtyard outside the hall was silent. His arrival startled away a few small birds that were looking for food. They flapped their wings and flew into the tall and dense forest, disappearing. Zhao Jianing was young and proud. He became a jinshi at the age of 19. He was the first jinshi of the imperial court and could be considered a disciple of the emperor. But he was born in Li Tang's era and grew up in Li Tang's time. He was also loyal to Li Tang's empire. After becoming an official, he was very close to the officials who had the same ambition. Because of this, he was ostracized and sent to Hanlin Academy, becoming a noble but powerless scholar. Ever since the Khitans and Turks used the excuse of protecting Li Tang and rebelling against the Zhou, Wu Zetian, who was too old to rectify the situation, had to use many of Li Tang's old officials to stabilize the political situation and the people. Wei Jigu and Yao Chong became prime ministers one after another. After they gained power, they immediately transferred Zhao Jianing out of Hanlin Academy and appointed him as the secretariat renderer. He was young, but was already in the center of a confidential department. Obviously, the two prime ministers wanted to train him. Zhao Jianing was on the same side as the two prime ministers, so he did not regard himself as an outsider. As soon as he entered the political affairs hall, he cupped his hands in greeting and said to Wei Jigu and Yao Chong in a hurry, "Prime Minister Wei, Prime Minister Yao, Master Di went to Dragon Gate." Yao Chong was shocked and said, "Master Di went to Dragon Gate? He has already recovered?" Zhao Jianing shook his head and said, "Master Di's body is sick, and he's getting weaker day by day. He can't even withstand the jolting of an ox cart or carriage." He was carried to the Dragon Gate in a soft palanquin, but before he could leave the Ding-Ding Gate, he fainted again. His son was by his side, and there was also a doctor carrying a medicine box. Wei Jigu stopped and stroked his beard as he murmured, "This old fox is so unyielding. He's going to sacrifice his life to protect Prince Luling." Yao Chong circled around the hall twice and suddenly stomped his foot heavily. "I can't hesitate any more. Duke Wei, we can't pretend to be deaf and mute at this time. We have to stand up for him. Otherwise, everyone in the world will criticize us." Wei Jigu hesitated. "But those officials," Yao Chong said, "we can't care about that anymore. Let's go to Dragon Gate first. We'll explain the pros and cons to them later." Wei Jigu lowered his head and thought for a moment. He crossed his fist and palm and said in a low voice, "Fine. Master Di is already in such a state, but he still wants to go to Dragon Gate. Even if we consider our lifelong friendship, we still have to go. Let's go." Seeing that the two had made up their minds, Zhao Jianing immediately said, "I'll go first. Prepare a horse outside the palace." At this time, Princess Taiping had already entered the palace through the Gate of Light. Following the long corridor formed by the red walls and roof tiles, she was hurrying toward Wu Zetian's lovely spring terrace. Her dress fluttered like water, and her belt fluttered in the wind. The golden ornament on her head trembled with anxiety. After borrowing the spy, Yang Fan now used the entire court civil and military officials. He lived on Dragon Gate Mountain in a flashy manner, bathing in the hot spring and eating fresh fruits. He quietly waited for people to come, like a burning torch that attracted all the moths. If the Taiping party, the Prince of Xiang party, and the Luling party still did not know that he was protecting the Prince of Luling at EK Dragon Gate, they could have packed up and retired long ago. How could they fight against the two princes of the Wu clan? As long as they knew, the shock, anxiety, and hesitation they showed when they did not know anything was enough to dispel anyone's doubts and make them believe that the Prince of Luling was at Dragon Gate. Only when the Dragon Gate was lively could Luoyang be quiet and the Prince of Luling be safe. He rested for a night in Yi County and then only traveled 50 li each day, staying one night in Wuyan and one night in Xianqing. This period of time was enough for Huang Xuchang to protect the prince and travel far ahead of him. Even if he sped up on the third day, unless something happened to Huang Xuchang and the Prince of Luling on the way, they would have already reached Luoyang. Entering Luoyang was the last hurdle. In order to ensure that nothing unexpected happened at this last hurdle, he appeared at Dragon Gate. The crafty and cunning monk Fajing returned to his temple in his high-toothed wooden clogs to enter seclusion. He had lent the monk to Yang Fan, but he didn't know why Yang Fan wanted to receive him. He was in seclusion. He was a monk and did not concern himself with worldly affairs. The reason why he was willing to lend Yang Fan was that Yang Fan had the imperial edict. What he did must be in line with the way of heaven and the law of the country. As a highly virtuous monk and a monk who had been blessed by the emperor for a long time, he naturally had to contribute to the royal family. This was the first time Li Bauer had bathed in a hot spring. She had only ever heard of this kind of steaming hot spring water that came from the ground. Her mother had said that after bathing in this spring water, one's skin would become as tender as cream, as smooth and comfortable as if it had been smeared with a layer of talcum powder. This was also the first time she had seen such a magnificent palace-like building since she was born. Before, she had only seen bamboo and wood roofs and yellow mud roofs. She had never even seen a tile-roofed house, not to mention such a magnificent and huge house with giant stone carvings. And such a beautiful and huge house was actually just a bathroom. She happily soaked in the bath and was not even willing to come out. Gu Zhuting also had a very pleasant hot spring bath. Not only did she wander from place to place, but cleanliness was also a problem. This was the biggest worry for a girl. Now, she could finally take a bath to her heart's content. But what could make a beauty more beautiful? Light, moonlight, wine, colorful clothes, fresh flowers, cosmetics, and even a bath. A real beauty not only had beautiful facial features, but also a graceful figure. Their skin was also excellent. When a beauty came out of the bath, her cheeks would not be unnaturally flushed. Instead, it would be a bright red, even and natural. Her beautiful black hair was tied up in a bun, revealing her long and elegant neck. Her fair face had a touch of blush, and her delicate collarbone was exposed. Her delicate white skin was like a freshly peeled egg white. It was an enchanting scene. Unfortunately, this beautiful scene was only a flash in the pan. After Gu Zhuting came out of the bath, she sat in front of the dressing table and picked up not rouge and face powder. Nor was it a fine brush for drawing eyebrows and lips, but a box of herbal paste that was light yellow in color. She still had to continue playing this Prince of Luling. Slowly, the beautiful girl who had just bathed for the first time disappeared. What appeared in the dressing mirror was the image of a haggard and old middle-aged man. There was no beard under his chin, and his wrinkles were piled up, making him look like a eunuch. The eunuch revealed a helpless smile to the mirror and began to stick his beard strand by strand. When Gu Zhuting finally turned into a completely different person and even changed her clothes, the sun was setting in the west, and there was already a trace of twilight on the mountain. Gu Zhuting opened the door and walked out. To her surprise, she found Yang Fan standing outside her door, looking into the distance with his hands behind his back. Hearing the voice behind him, he turned around and smiled at her. "Done." "Yes." Facing Yang Fan's burning gaze, Gu Zhuting somewhat unnaturally raised her hand, wanting to tidy up her hair. Only when she raised her hand did she remember that she was playing the Prince of Luling. Such an action was too strange, and she couldn't help but smile in surprise. Yang Fan gazed at her and suddenly said softly, "You've really worked hard." He didn't say much, just this one sentence, as if everything was said without words. Gu Zhuting's heart suddenly trembled, as if someone had suddenly plucked the strings of a zither that had been left empty in the corner for a long time. Her eyes turned a little red, and she hurriedly turned around and slowly walked to Yang Fan's side. Pretending to be tranquil, she smiled and said, "It's nothing. Being together with Ah Lang, the things we do are much more interesting than before. It's not fighting and killing, but it's more difficult and fun than fighting and killing. I've been bathing and changing my appearance for more than 4 hours. The sect leader has been waiting here all this time just to thank me?" Gu Zhuting pretended to look around naturally. She thought carefully in her heart and suddenly felt warm all over her body. "Hey, Brother Yang. Ahem, Lieutenant Yang." Suddenly, a girl's voice as clear as the chirping of an oriole came from afar. Feeling the unnatural atmosphere between the two of them quietly enshrouded, the two of them felt relieved. Looking into the distance, they saw Li Gua, jumping between the flowers and grass and running towards them. She was wearing a light red, narrow-sleeved, short-sleeved jacket with dark patterns and a pleated silk skirt with a slim waist. She bought it in a small shop in the alley when they were in Wyong. Wearing a set of very ordinary civilian clothes, she looked very charming. Ah, ouch! Seeing that she was about to run in front of them, Li Gua suddenly tripped and stumbled forward. Yang Fan could see that she was not sincere. She really tripped on a protruding rock on the ground. Just when he was hesitating whether he should go forward to help her, Gu Zhuting's figure flashed and flashed in front of him. Yang Fan stopped in his tracks. Gu Zhuting gently bent down and grabbed Li Gua's arm. She said lightly, "Princess, please be careful." Li Gua did not care about this person who looked exactly like her father, but spoke with a soft female voice. She twisted her waist and dodged Gu Zhuting. She smiled at Yang Fan and said, "I soaked in a hot spring for too long, so I feel a little dizzy." "It's really good here, so gorgeous, like heaven," Yang Fan smiled and said, "When you go to the palace, you will know what gorgeous is. This place is far worse than the palace. It can only be said to be shabby." "Really?" Li Gua's eyes sparkled. "Then when can we go to the palace?" Yang Fan said soon. "No matter what, it should be delayed until tonight." As he said, Yang Fan looked up at the sky. When he looked down, he suddenly fixed his eyes on the mountain road in the distance. He slowly smiled and said, "Someone is coming." Li Gua immediately became nervous. She subconsciously moved closer to him and said timidly, "Is it the Wu family?" Yang Fan said, "Don't worry, their target is not you. In any case, they will not attack a woman." Speaking of this, Yang Fan turned his head and smiled a little childishly at Gu Zhuting and Li Gua, as if he had done some kind of prank, and said, "My last plan is called the Fire Beacon to play with the feudal vassals. Guess which feudal vassals will come first." Chapter 813. Yang Fan narrowed his eyes. Li Gua's heart was thumping wildly. It would be a lie to say that she was not nervous. Her thin lower lip had already turned white from biting it. But when she looked at Yang Fan and saw that he was calm and composed, Li Gua's heart calmed down. "Ah, so it's them," Yang Fan softly exclaimed, and a relaxed smile appeared on his face. Li Gua stared at his expression and cautiously asked, "They are not enemies, right?" Yang Fan turned his head and smiled at her. "They are your aunt's people." "My aunt." All the relatives in Li Gua's mind were just abstract names. She had never seen any of them. After thinking for a while, she exclaimed, "Princess Taiping." Yang Fan said, "That's right, Princess Taiping." The characteristics of the guards sent by Princess Taiping were too obvious. 8 plump and strong female sumo wrestlers almost crushed the majestic war horses. Each of them had 2 horses behind them. The distance from Luoyang to EK Dragon Gate was so short that they had to change horses in order to not crush the horses to death. The climb up the mountain was even more strenuous. These 8 fat women were astonishingly heavy, and they could only walk a few steps before gasping for breath. Although Princess Taiping had ordered them to rush to the Dragon Gate as fast as possible and protect the Prince of Luling, they really could not move fast enough. When they stopped, their huge and plump bodies blocked the entire mountain path. The ordinary guards behind them could only stop and wait for them to catch their breath. On the hillside, Liguer's eyes widened, and she said in surprise, These are my aunt's people? They can't even walk. How can they protect us?" Yang Fan glanced at her and said, "If a top expert who doesn't know how to swim falls into the river, a village urchin who knows how to swim can also take his life. All abilities were relative and could only be displayed in a suitable environment. They can't climb a mountain. If it's a fight on flat ground, I can deal with one of these 8 people. I can barely deal with 2. 3 I will lose, for I will die. If the 8 of them come at me together, I won't be able to escape even if I wanna." Li Bauer swallowed with difficulty. Yang Fan smiled and said, "Your aunt only has a total of 8 sumo masters. In the past, no matter where she went, she would bring at least 2 of them with her to protect herself. Now that she has sent all 8, your aunt really treats you guys very well." Liguor nodded silently. The 8 female sumo wrestlers finally climbed up the mountain. After panting for a while, like sleeping tigers, they asked someone about the whereabouts of the Prince of Luling. The martial monks on the mountain had already received orders from Yang Fan and did not stop them from climbing the mountain. They even sent a martial monk to lead them to Yang Fan. "Commandant Yang." The 8 female sumo wrestlers had all met Yang Fan before, and some of them had even heard of Yang Fan and Princess Taiping. Since they were all familiar with each other, there was no need for formalities. The 8 women cupped their hands in greeting to Yang Fan. One of them took a step forward and said straightforwardly, "May I ask which one of you is His Highness, the Prince of Luling?" As she spoke, her eyes were already on Gu Zhuting. She was the only one who had been by Yang Fan's side and was of a similar age and appearance. Yang Fan took a step back and solemnly said, "This is the Prince of Luling." The 8 women and the armed guards behind them immediately cupped their hands in greeting to Gu Zhuting. "The guards of Princess Taiping's residence greet your highness." "Good, good. Warriors, rise. Sister Taiping, is she well?" Gu Zhuting's face was filled with surprise and joy. She perfectly imitated the expression and reaction that the Prince of Luling should have. It was the leader of the 8 women who answered on behalf of everyone. "The princess is well. When we were ordered to rush to the Dragon Gate, the princess had already entered the palace. I believe she will be here soon." "Good, good, good." Based on the principle of saying too much was bound to make mistakes, Gu Zhuting did not say much. In any case, the Prince of Luling had been locked up in Huangzhuling for 16 years. No one knew what kind of personality he had now. Yang Fan said again, "This is the youngest daughter of your highness, Princess Bao." Now that Li Guo'er's official identity was brought up, it was not appropriate to tell others her maiden name. However, this princess was born on the road where her father was sent to Fang province. The imperial family did not care about her and did not even give her a title. They could only use her name for the time being. Everyone bowed to Li Guo'er again. Li Guo'er's beautiful face was flushed with excitement. It was only at this moment that she truly felt the nobility of her identity. Although Yang Fan and the others had been very respectful to her before, that was when they were fleeing for their lives. She had never felt such a respectful attitude. Dispense with the formalities." Li Guo'er was so excited that she even stuttered a little. She only managed to say one sentence, but she quickly regained her composure and quickly adapted to this new identity. She was no longer a lowly prisoner, but a princess of the imperial court. While they were talking and greeting each other, people shouted and horses neighed in the distance. At this time, the sun was about to set and dusk had already arrived. It was quiet at the foot of the mountain, and there were no pedestrians. Therefore, the sudden appearance of a group of people stood out. Because the people of Princess Taiping's residence were all present, Yang Fan did not joke with Gu Zhuting and Li Guo this time. He only looked at the approaching group of people and muttered to himself in his heart, "Who are these second feudal vassals?" Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong came from the political affairs hall and did not bring many family warriors with them. However, they were the prime ministers. According to the rules of the Tang dynasty, the prime minister was in charge of the 16 imperial guards of the southern Yamen, while the imperial guards of the northern Yamen reported directly to the emperor. After Wu Zetian ascended the throne, the direct guards of the eastern palace, led by the crown prince, were reduced, and the power of the prime minister was also weakened. He no longer had the power to directly mobilize troops. However, the prime minister was still the supreme commander of the southern Yamen imperial guards in name. Therefore, when they went out, the imperial guards were equipped with a guard force. Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong led their guards out of the Dingding Gate as fast as lightning. Today, the old soldiers guarding the Dingding Gate had their eyes opened. One after another, big shots led a large group of people and rushed out as if they were fighting a fire. They did not know what was happening outside the city. Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong urged their horses and rushed towards the Dragon Gate. Suddenly, they saw a group of people and a soft sedan in the middle. Wei Zhigu's heart suddenly sank, and he thought, "Master D!" The group heard people shouting and horses neighing behind them. They turned around and saw the flag they raised. They knew who was coming and had already informed Di Renjie. The group of people waited by the roadside. Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong drove their horses to the front. They got off their horses and quickly walked to the side of the soft sedan that had been lowered. At a glance, they saw Di Renjie lying on the sedan. He looked haggard and had sunken eyes. He used to be such a humorous, tough, and lively person, but now he had been tortured by illness. Wei Zhigu and Di Renjie had been ministers in the same palace for many years. Even though they had different supporters in the end, they had always been on the same side in the political upheavals. They could be considered like-minded old friends. Seeing Di Renjie in such a state, Wei Zhigu felt a lump in his throat and cried out, "Master Di!" Yao Chong had not interacted much with Di Renjie, but he greatly admired this old minister of the nation. Seeing Di Renjie like this, he could not help but sigh. He silently bowed to Di Renjie and stood to the side with Zhao Jianing, the renunciator of the Secretariat of Government. The corner of Di Renjie's mouth twitched a few times. He seemed to want to smile at his old friend, but in the end he couldn't. His eyes dimmed, and he tried to open his mouth to say something with a trembling voice. His voice was too soft. Although no one around dared to speak, Wei Zhigu still didn't hear it clearly. He bent down and pressed his white-haired head against Di Renjie's mouth. Only then did he hear a very faint voice. "Duke Wei, please, please!" Wei Zhigu's tears that had just stopped gushed out like spring water. He straightened his body and nodded to Di Renjie. He choked and said, "Don't worry, Master Di. This time I will go. Even if I have to give up my life, I will protect Luling." Di Renjie nodded gently. A hint of gratification flashed through his eyes. Wei Zhigu wiped away his tears and said to Di Renjie, "This matter is urgent. This servant will hurry over right away. Master Di, please do not be anxious. Travel slowly, and your health is more important." He didn't try to persuade Di Renjie to go back. He knew that Di Renjie wouldn't be at ease until he saw the king of Luling with his own eyes. There was no need to say such useless words. Wei Zhigu had his family help him onto a horse. He whipped the horse, and it galloped in the direction of the Dragon's Gate under the setting sun. It's King Liang's men. Yang Fan could already see the flags at the foot of the mountain. His eyes narrowed. "Who is it? Are they here to help us, or—" Li Guo didn't hear Yang Fan's mutterings. She was rather short, and there was only a short tree in front of her. She stood on her tiptoes and could only make out the figures on the mountain, but not their flags. Yang Fan took a deep breath and said, "It's your uncle, Wu Sansi." Li Guo's face immediately paled. The trauma of being imprisoned in the mountains for so many years resurfaced in her mind. Yang Fan suddenly smiled. These Wu clan kings were obviously not to be trifled with. However, wasn't his goal precisely to draw these people here? If Wu Sanxi was here, then Wu Qingxi shouldn't be too far away. The more people that came, the more smoothly his plan would go. Yang Fan turned around to take a look. Princess Taiping's 8 female sumo wrestlers had their hands clasped behind their backs. They were dressed in sumo attire, and they stood there in high spirits. Only now did Yang Fan notice that they were actually equipped with weapons today. The 8 of them were each equipped with a pair of blades. The blades weren't very long because they were sheathed at their waists. The hilts of the blades could be seen on either side. If the blades were of normal length, even with their burly backs and bear-like waists, there should still be a blade on either side of their thighs. In the distance, there were a few monks wielding heavy black cudgels. Their appearances were imposing and indomitable. The inner guards and 100 cavalrymen who had rested for an entire day rushed out when they heard the news. Every one of them had sharp blades in their hands, and they were brimming with killing intent. Yang Fan smiled in satisfaction. He waved his hand at the 8 sumo wrestlers and said, "Escort the king and the princess back to their rooms to rest." The king of Luling gave him a worried look and asked, "Then what about you, Officer Yang?" Yang Fan tightened his belt, dusted off his robes, and said indifferently, "I'll go down the mountain to meet him." Chapter 814. Li Guerre sat cross-legged on the couch, her head slightly tilted to the side as she bit her pinky finger. Gu Zhuting sat peacefully in front of the mirror. She seemed to be scrutinizing her own reflection, trying to see if there were any flaws. Li Guerre bit her pinky finger for a while. She couldn't help but ask Gu Zhuting, "Guard Gu, what do you think Officer Yang will do when he meets that King Liang?" Gu Zhuting glanced at her. It was a very feminine look, but she did not say anything. Li Guerre didn't seem to mind. She continued, "King Liang has always wanted to kill my father, and Officer Yang is my father's protector. Do you think that they will immediately start fighting when they meet?" Gu Zhuting glanced at her again, but still didn't say anything. Li Guerre was getting more and more excited. She began to speak faster and faster. "Say, if they fight, King Liang is just a prince who has been pampered all his life. I don't think he's that good. Will Officer Yang kill him with a single slash?" Gu Zhuting sighed, interrupting Li Guerre's daydream. "Princess, even if he knows that those assassins were sent by King Liang, and even if he has concrete evidence, Officer Yang still won't make a move against him. Officials have their own rules." Li Guerre couldn't help but feel nervous. Then wouldn't Officer Yang be at a disadvantage? Officer Yang can't make a move, but King Liang can do it without any reservations. What do we do? Even though Li Guerre was smart, she had grown up in the mountains, and her knowledge in many aspects wasn't much better than that of a country bumpkin. Gu Zhuting could only patiently explain, even though King Liang is completely unrestrained, this is just how the bureaucracy works. Even if 2 people fight to the death, even if everyone knows that they are like fire and water, they still have to pay attention to face. King Liang could send people to assassinate the king of Luling, but he wouldn't do it himself, nor would he allow his people to do it in front of him. It was just a thin layer of paper, but it couldn't be pierced through no matter how hard he tried. This is how it works in the bureaucracy and the great clans. Li Guerre still didn't understand. The 2 of them were clearly fighting to the death, so why was there still a need for such a fake mask? She asked in confusion. "Then, what do you think will happen when Commander Yang meets King Liang?" Gu Zhuting's fingers that were stroking her cheeks paused for a moment. She revealed a curious expression and replied leisurely, "I also want to know." "Your Highness, this subject, Yang Fan, greets Prince." Alone, Yang Fan quickly went down the mountain to welcome him. Wu Sansi had just dismounted from his horse and was about to go up the mountain when he suddenly saw Yang Fan walking down the mountain as if he was flying. He could not help but snort heavily and halted his steps, coldly looking at him. Yang Fan lifted the sleeves of his robe and jogged over to Wu Sansi's side. He bowed and said, "This subject Yang Fan greets your highness. Your highness, please forgive me for not going out to welcome you." Wu Sansi laughed angrily and said coldly, I wouldn't dare. Yang Fan, you are truly capable. How could this prince dare to take offense at His Majesty's trust in you?" Yang Fan's face tightened. He said in a terrified voice, "This subject is the Emperor's subject and also your Highness's disciple. Your Highness's words have truly terrified me." Wu Sansi was so angry that he began to laugh. He pointed his horsewhip at him and shouted angrily, "Yang Fan, you still dare to say that you are this prince's disciple? The Emperor ordered you to bring Luling back to the capital, but this prince was actually kept in the dark all this time. You really are my good disciple. You still dare to say such things to mock this prince." Yang Fan hurriedly said, "This subject does not dare. This subject is filled with difficulties. Your Highness, please step aside for a moment." Wu Sansi forcefully lashed out with his horsewhip and strode towards a small pentagonal pavilion next to a stream. Yang Fan immediately tiptoed and followed behind him, looking like a treacherous subject. Wu Sansi sat down on a stone bench in the pavilion. He coldly stared at Yang Fan and said, "What else do you have to say?" Yang Fan bowed and said, "This subject has nothing to say. I only wish to ask for forgiveness from your Highness." "Huh." Wu Sansi sneered. He suddenly stood up and was about to walk out of the pavilion. Yang Fan immediately said, "When His Majesty secretly summoned Yang Fan, he once issued a decree. If Luling survives, Yang Fan survives. If Luling dies, Yang Fan dies. Yang Fan's family, young and old, are all in the Emperor's hands. This subject dares to ask your Highness, what do you think this subject should do?" Wu Sansi abruptly stopped in his tracks. His leopard eyes coldly swept over Yang Fan. Yang Fan's expression was gloomy and his eyes were faintly glistening with tears. Wu Sansi couldn't help but become silent. These days there weren't many single-minded death warriors like those of the pre-Qin era. Even if they were death warriors of that era, how many of them didn't entrust their wives and children with their lives in order to repay their masters? He treated Yang Fan well, but was it worth it for him to abandon his wife and children? Even those family warriors in his residence, if they knew they were going to die and still wanted to spare the lives of their family, would they be willing to work for him without hesitation? Yang Fan said, "Your Highness's kindness to Yang Fan is as heavy as a mountain. Even if I have to repay it with my life, this subject will not refuse. However, this subject has lost everything at a young age. Now, I only have my wife and children left. They are all in the hands of the imperial experts. This subject really has no choice. Moreover, although this subject is the leader of the people sent to bring the Prince of Luling back to the capital, the Emperor still trusts the internal guards the most. Ever since the Prince of Luling was brought out, this subject has only been in charge of the overall plan. The one guarding the Prince of Luling has always been the High Commandant of the Internal Guards. Your Highness also knows that the High Commandant's rank is even higher than mine. There are many things that I cannot decide." Yang Fan still didn't want to publicly break off relations with Wu Sansi. Even if the latter didn't trust him as much as before, as long as there was a shred of hesitation in his heart, it would still be beneficial to him. Thus, he spared no effort to draw a clear line between himself and Wu Sansi. As Yang Fan spoke, he even wiped the corners of his eyes. In the end, perhaps because he felt too wronged, he couldn't hold back his tears. For a moment, his face was covered in tear stains. Seeing his tears fall like rain, the hatred in Wu Sansi's heart lessened somewhat. Yang Fan thought to himself, "Damn, If I put too much of this mustard on, it's so spicy that I can't even open my eyes. Wu Sanzi steadied himself, his face cloudy for a moment before he coldly said, "Is the Prince of Luling on the mountain?" "Yes." "Ah, no, not." The Prince of Luling coldly stared at him. Yang Fan lowered his head, doing his best to endure the spiciness of the mustard. His face was twisted, and in Wu Sanzi's eyes, it looked like he was struggling inside. Seeing this, Wu Sanzi increased his strength and softened his voice, saying, "You've already escorted Luling to the capital. Although you haven't sent him to the emperor yet, you've already done your duty. Under these circumstances, as long as this prince is willing to protect you, I believe that even if something happens to Luling, His Majesty won't do anything to you. Haha. What's more, this prince is openly going up the mountain today. I won't do anything to Luling in front of everyone, right? Right now, this prince only wants you to tell me the truth. Is Luling on the mountain or not?" Yang Fan lowered his head and gradually got used to the mustard's irritation. Only then did he slowly raise his head. With a hesitant expression, he said, "His Majesty kills people like mowing grass. Towards Prince, His Majesty naturally won't go to war. But towards this subject, can Prince really protect this subject's life and the safety of this subject's family?" Wu Sanzi boldly said, "A gentleman keeps his word. Don't tell me you don't believe what this prince says." He raised 3 fingers and said sternly, with the yellow sky above and the thick earth below, "I, Wu Sanzi, hereby swear that if Yang Fan tells me the truth and this prince turns a blind eye to Yang Fan and his family, breaking my own promise, heaven and earth will curse me." Yang Fan hesitated for a long time before saying with difficulty, "Prince of Luling is not on the mountain." Wu Sanzi's people had already received Wei Yang's secret report, so Wu Sanzi naturally also knew. Wei Yang's secret report clearly stated that the one Yang Fan was escorting was the real Prince of Luling, which was the most reasonable. Would Yang Fan risk handing over the Prince of Luling, whose life and death were closely related to him, to someone else to escort him back to the capital? But now, Yang Fan said that the Prince of Luling he was escorting was a fake. Although he knew that Yang Fan was trying to protect his family and was not loyal to the Li family, Wu Sanzi still hated and was furious. He squinted at Yang Fan and sneered, "Is this true?" Yang Fan nodded forcefully and said through clenched teeth, "Absolutely true." Wu Sanzi shouted sternly, "Look me in the eyes when you speak." Yang Fan shivered, and his fleeting gaze met Wu Sanzi's. Wu Sanzi stared at him with a fierce gaze and said word by word, "Is the real Prince of Luling on the mountain or not?" Yang Fan only hesitated for a moment before saying in a deep voice, "Your Highness's kindness in grooming is something this subject does not dare to forget. This subject has entrusted the lives of my family and my entire family to your Highness. The Prince of Luling is really not on the mountain. The real Prince of Luling has already been secretly escorted back to the capital by 100 cavalrymen who faked his death. This subject does not know where they are or whether they have reached the capital." Wu Sanzi stared coldly at him for a long time before suddenly laughing 3 times. "Good. Follow this prince up the mountain." Yang Fan asked in surprise, "Why is your Highness going up the mountain?" Wu Sanzi's gaze turned cold. "Didn't you say that the Prince of Luling really isn't on the mountain? So what if this prince goes up the mountain? Why are you panicking?" Yang Fan hurriedly said, "This subject is not panicking. This subject only feels that your Highness doesn't seem to believe this subject's words." Wu Sanzi sneered. "I believe. Of course I believe. Only, although this prince isn't familiar with the Prince of Luling, we have met several times in the past. This prince is curious and wishes to go up the mountain to take a look. Is this not allowed?" "Yes." Then this subject will accompany your Highness up the mountain." Wu Sanzi took large strides in front, and Yang Fan followed closely behind as they ascended the mountain. The Liang estate's guards followed behind them. Yang Fan couldn't help but glance back. Wu Sansi, who had been paying attention to his movements, grew even more suspicious. He couldn't help but ridicule. "Don't worry, they are this prince's guards. They can't be assassins. But does this prince not need someone to protect him when he goes out?" Yang Fan hurriedly said, "How could this subject dare to suspect your highness? This subject is only taking a casual look. Wu Sansi snorted coldly and sped up the mountain. Yang Fan rolled his eyes and followed closely behind, whispering, "Does your highness have a spy among us?" Wu Sansi was moved. He coldly snorted and said, "If this prince had a spy among you, would this prince have been fooled by you?" Yang Fan made an "oh" sound and muttered to himself, "In that case he is Prince Wei's man." Wu Sansi suddenly stopped and stared at Yang Fan. "What did you say? Who is Prince Wei's man?" Chapter 8:15. "It's like this." Yang Fan spoke word by word. Wu Sansi slowed down his pace, listening to what he was saying. Monk Fa Zhang, who was in seclusion, stealthily circled around from the front of the mountain and watched from a high vantage point. He saw Yang Fan gesticulating as he walked, while the overbearing Liang Wangwang and Wu Sansi listened with rapt attention. From the looks of it, it was as if Wu Sansi had just arrived at Dragon's Gate and Yang Fan was acting as a guide, introducing to him the historical sites and legends of this place. Fa Zhang shook his head, put his palms together, and said, "Amit Ba." With a wave of his sleeve, he returned to his seclusion. Yang Fan told Wu Sansi in detail what happened on Yi County's mountain. Wu Sansi gave him a deep look. He already knew about these things, but he didn't know that Huang Xuchang was faking his death, nor did he know that this was a scheme to deceive the traitor. He really thought that Huang Xuchang was Wu Qingxi's man. Wu Sansi said coldly, "You've really exhausted all your schemes." With a bitter face, Yang Fan said, "Your Highness, please understand. This idea was actually thought up by the inner guards. After coming up with it, they went to me and Commander Huang to discuss it. This subject wanted to protect the safety of my family, so I couldn't let anything happen to the Prince of Luling. Naturally, I agreed to this plan." Wu Sansi suddenly interrupted him, saying, "Since Huang Xuchang is a fake traitor, then you just said that he was Prince Wei's man. This he, who are you talking about?" Yang Fan said, "This subject is talking about Wei Yong." Wu Sansi's heart thumped when he heard this, but his expression didn't change. He said, "Wei Yong? Who is he? What happened to him?" Yang Fan said, "Wei Yong is also one of the imperial bodyguards who went to Fangzhou to welcome the Prince of Luling. He believed that we were escorting the real Prince of Luling. Seeing that we were about to arrive at Luoyang, in a moment of desperation, he actually wanted to assassinate the Prince of Luling in the middle of the night. In the end, he failed and was killed by Miss Gao and Miss Lan, who were guarding the prince." Wu Sansi's heart sank when he heard this. The reason why he insisted on going up the mountain was because he didn't believe Yang Fan's words. He also wanted to find Wei Yong and ask him about it. He believed that as long as he went up the mountain, Wei Yong would definitely find an opportunity to report to him. The benefits that he promised Wei Yong was something that Wei Yong couldn't obtain even if he worked hard for a lifetime. He wasn't afraid that Wei Yong wouldn't give up on him, but he didn't expect that Wei Yong was already dead. Wu Sansi's pace was getting slower and slower. He thought to himself, was it a ruse on Yi County Hill? I really didn't know about this. Could it be that Yang Fan was telling the truth when he said that the Prince of Luling was a fake? He shot another glance at Yang Fan, but the Prince of Luling's words had been alternating between truth and falsehood, false and true, sometimes true and sometimes false, sometimes true and sometimes false, making it impossible for him to tell whether Yang Fan's words were true or false. Yang Fan said in a very relieved tone, "When we said that Huang Xuchang was King Wei's spy on Yi County Hill, It was just a casual remark. We never thought that Wei Yong was actually King Wei's spy. Fortunately, Wei Yong wasn't sure if King Wei had bribed anyone else. No, fortunately. Only now did Yang Fan seem to recall that this King Liang wanted nothing more than for the Prince of Luling to die. He awkwardly changed his words and pretended to be considerate as he said, I didn't expect King Wei to have already bribed a spy among us. From this, it can be seen how meticulous he is. Such a person will definitely be a formidable opponent for your Highness. Your Highness, you must be careful. Wu Sanxi snorted coldly, but he didn't expose the fact that Wei Yong was his spy. No matter how he thought about it, he still couldn't confirm whether Yang Fan was telling the truth or not. In the end, he could only stop and call out, Men. Zhang Yu immediately stepped forward and cupped his fists. Wu Sanxi turned to Yang Fan and asked, How does that guard surnamed Huang look like? Yang Fan gave a detailed description, and Wu Sanxi said to Zhang Yu, Did you hear that? Immediately take the men back to the city and increase the security on land and water to prevent that person from sneaking in. That person should be accompanied by someone like the one Yang Fan described. But there might not necessarily be such a person accompanying him. Wu Sanxi didn't know whether he should believe Yang Fan's words or not, so he simply waved his hand and said in annoyance, Don't worry about this person's appearance. Just go back and interrogate anyone suspicious. Zheng Yu was stunned. That person, isn't he on the mountain? Wu Sanxi rebuked, Idiot. How do you know he didn't disguise himself and take a shortcut to go down the mountain? Remember, you must increase the security in Luoyang. It's one thing if he's on the mountain, but if he enters the city right under your nose, you can forget about your head. Zhang Yu's heart trembled. He hurriedly agreed and led his group down the mountain. Wu Sanxi sighed. He couldn't tell the truth from the lies of Yang Fan's words, so he could only place his focus on Dragon Gate. Actually, after learning of the Prince of Luling's appearance at Dragon Gate, he didn't remove the security in Luoyang. He just strengthened it a little more. Luoyang was the emperor's capital after all, so he couldn't seal the city even if he wanted to. Such a big city had an astronomical number of people entering and exiting every day. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to find a person among so many people. If he kept a close eye on Dragon Gate, as long as the Prince of Luling here was real, the chances of success were not small. If he blindly believed in Yang Fan's words and transferred the main forces to keep an eye on Luoyang, if this turned out to be another one of Yang Fan's schemes to lure the tiger away from the mountain, once the palace reacted and took the Prince of Luling away, the situation would be over. The more Wu Sanxi thought about it, the heavier his thoughts became. He no longer had the imposing manner from before, and just slowly climbed up the hot spring mountain step by step. When Wu Sanxi reached the top of the mountain, he was slightly out of breath. With a gloomy expression, he asked, Where is this fake Prince of Luling? Yang Fan hurriedly led the way, saying, Your Highness, please come this way. In the past, there used to be a residence on this mountain that belonged to the Prince of Luling, but now it's not owned. Any imperial prince or duke can stay there, but the Prince of Luling, since this fake Prince of Luling has come up the mountain, it'll be arranged there. Yang Fan seemed to have said the wrong thing because it was a slip of the tongue, but Wu Sanxi had the mentality of when one loses one's axe, one suspects one's neighbor. Even normal words and actions were suspicious in his eyes, not to mention saying the wrong thing. Wu Sanxi's suspicions of this fake Prince of Luling immediately increased. Yang Fan led the Prince of Luling to the side of a palace room and gently stopped, saying with shame, Your Highness, please don't reveal in front of the inner guards and 100 cavalry that I've said to your Highness, Cough, cough, what did I say? In a while, if Yang Fan does anything disrespectful to your Highness, it's because I have no other choice. I hope your Highness can understand. Wu Sanxi had just increased his suspicions of his words, but now that he heard him mention in a very natural manner not to let the inner guards and the 100 cavalry sense anything but not the Prince of Luling. He couldn't help but think, could it be that this Prince of Luling is fake? Otherwise, why would he only worry about the inner guards and the 100 cavalry, and not worry about exposing the secret to me in front of the Prince of Luling? Wu Sansi thought to himself, then said impatiently, I know. Will this prince violate the oath I made to heaven and earth? Go and invite the Prince of Luling to meet him. Say that this prince went up the mountain to bathe in the hot springs and was shocked to hear that the Prince of Luling had returned to the capital. So I came to pay my respects. Yang Fan replied, Yes. Your Highness, please wait a moment. Yang Fan quickly stepped forward and explained to the 100 cavalry guards in front of the door. Meanwhile, Wu Sansi secretly shot a glance at Li Daong and the others, an ominous glint in his eyes. At this moment, another group of people arrived at the foot of the mountain. The neighing of horses could be heard clearly in the quiet valley. Wu Sansi frowned and asked, Who is it? Li Daong sent someone to the front of the mountain to take a look, and a moment later he reported, Your Highness, it seems like a husband from the Political Affairs Hall has arrived. Judging from the banner, it should be him. However, we still don't know which husband it is. Wu Sansi frowned. If these people were allowed to ascend the mountain, it would be difficult for them to commit a crime. Wu Sansi immediately rushed forward. When he saw that Yang Fan was still explaining something to the 100 cavalry, he glared at them and shouted, How dare you? This prince wishes to meet the Prince of Luling. Do you dare to stop me? Hurry up and send the message in. The 100 cavalry didn't dare to openly contradict King Liang. When they saw Yang Fan secretly shoot them a glance, they immediately complied. The others continued to guard the door, and only Zhang Shitong dashed into the courtyard. Wu Sansi grew impatient. Just as he was about to barge in, Zhang Shitong ran back out and said while gasping for breath, Your Highness, please! The Prince of Luling is already waiting for you in the hall. Wu Sansi was furious. The Prince of Luling is putting on airs. This prince has come to see him, yet he doesn't come out to welcome me. Zhang Shidong said, Your Highness, the Prince of Luling has been in a hurry on his way back to the capital. His legs have been worn down by the saddle, so he can't even take a single step forward. As such, he can only wait respectfully in the hall. Wu Sansi snorted coldly and began to walk in. Li Daong and the others were about to follow, but they were stopped by the 100 cavalry. Wu Sansi's face darkened. What? Even this prince's guards are not allowed to enter. Do you think this prince will harm the Prince of Luling? Zhang Shitong replied in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Your Highness, these subjects are acting on His Majesty's decree. As long as the decree is not delivered, we must risk our lives to protect the Prince of Luling. If your Highness wishes to meet the Prince of Luling, we naturally do not dare to stop you. However, it would be improper for your guards to enter. There are naturally guards in the hall who can ensure your Highness's safety. I would like to ask your Highness's guards to remain outside. Wu Sansi domineeringly said, Other than entering the palace to see the Emperor, this prince has guards following me everywhere. No one has ever stopped this prince. Seeing this, Yang Fan hurriedly said, Then I would like to ask your Highness's guards to surrender their weapons. As he said this, he repeatedly signaled Wu Sansi with his eyes. Wu Sansi proudly said, Surrender their weapons. Are you telling them to protect this prince with their bare hands? As he said this, he was about to force his way in. Those 100 cavalry were the Emperor's subordinates. Although they respected him as a prince, they only obeyed the Emperor's orders. As soon as they saw that he was about to force his way in, they immediately drew their weapons, and the two sides entered a deadlock. Wu Sansi sternly said, You dare to attack this prince? Zhang Shitong calmly said, These subjects are only lowly guards. How could we dare to disrespect your Highness? It's just that, as 100 cavalry, we must obey His Majesty's orders. If we have offended your Highness, please forgive us. Wu Sansi was so angry that his entire body was trembling. Yang Fan hurriedly tried to mediate. "How about this? Your Highness will only bring 2 guards in. There's no need to surrender your weapons. If there are too many people in front and behind, this will indeed be somewhat inexcusable." Wu Sansi was helpless, but he was also afraid that those people at the foot of the mountain would quickly ascend the mountain. With a cold snort, he waved his hand at his subordinates and strode into the courtyard. Chapter 816. Yao Chong hurriedly climbed up the mountain, followed by a group of imperial guards of the southern office. On the mountain, Wu Sansi had already barged into the residence of the Prince of Luling. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he saw many spirited and energetic monks holding heavy black cudgels, standing in the middle of the courtyard like stakes. Wu Sansi thought of those imperial bodyguards who were beaten black and blue, and his face immediately darkened. But those monks just stood there with their eyes on their noses and their noses on their hearts, as if they were arhats cast in the courtyard. They did not even blink. They only obeyed the orders of their own abbot, and other people really disdained them. With a flick of his sleeve, Wu Sansi rushed into the main hall. As soon as he saw the valiant and formidable-looking female guards armed with sharp blades, he couldn't help thinking, "This defense is really impenetrable. There are 100 horsemen outside, monks in the middle, and internal guards inside. Even if I really wanted to force my way in, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to succeed." Those female guards who were standing there like a beautiful screen had no intention of getting out of the way when they saw Wu Sansi barging in. However, when they saw Yang Fan step forward and wave his hand, they moved to the left and right, opening a path for Wu Sansi. Wu Sansi focused his eyes and saw a man standing shakily in the middle of the hall, easily held by 2 female sumo wrestlers who looked like mountains of flesh. Next to these 2 female sumo wrestlers stood 3 other female sumo wrestlers, making a total of 8 mountains of flesh. At first glance, a suffocating feeling immediately assaulted one's senses. The man standing between them was actually not short, but compared to them he looked like a fragile quail. Princess Taiping's 8 personal female guards were well known in the capital, so Wu Sansi naturally recognized them. As soon as he saw them, Wu Sansi's eyes narrowed and he thought to himself, "Why did Princess Taiping also send people here? Even if I use all my men to force my way in, I definitely won't be able to kill him. Right now, I can only find out if he's real or not before thinking of a way. Real or not. Taiping is Li Xian's sister. She can't possibly not know the truth, right? If she sent people, then this Li Xian in front of me." As Wu Sansi thought to himself, he put on a surprised and happy expression and hurried toward the Prince of Luling. "Ayaya, Qilong, you really came back." Third thinking was going to climb the dragon gate to bathe in the hot spring. Unexpectedly, he heard that Qilong had come back. "Congratulations. Congratulations." As Wu Sansi spoke, he walked forward, carefully sizing up Li Xian's appearance. Sure enough, he was 60 to 70% similar to the 7th son of the Li clan. It was just that Li Xian had been a young man in his 20s, elegant and handsome. His every movement had the air of royalty. As for the person in front of him, his temples were gray, his face was covered in wrinkles, his body was bloated, and his skin was pale. He stood there unsteadily. If not for someone supporting him, he would have collapsed to the ground. Wu Sansi thought suspiciously, "Is this Li Xian really not Li Xian? Is there really such a so-called disguise technique in this world?" Li Xian looked at him, a slightly humble expression on his face. He cupped his fists and said, "Your Highness, King Liang, it has been a long time. My legs are injured from the journey, and I am unable to welcome you. Please forgive me." Wu Sansi laughed and said intimately, "We're all family, so there's no need to be so polite. Qilong, you can just call me as you usually do. What King Yang or your Highness? Isn't that a bit too distant?" As he spoke, he intimately stepped forward to grab Li Xian's hand. His hand accurately grabbed onto a fleshy, fat hand. It was the hand of the female sumo wrestler on Li Xian's right who had voluntarily offered it to him, blocking his hand from reaching out. Wu Sanxi's face darkened. "What are you doing?" The female sumo didn't care about him at all. She replied indifferently, "This servant has come under Princess Taiping's orders to protect His Highness, the Prince of Luling. Before the princess arrives, no one is allowed to take half a step near the Prince of Luling. Otherwise, if anything happens to the prince, this servant will not be able to explain it to the princess." Wu Sanxi said angrily, "Do you know who I am?" The female sumo said, "This servant is Princess Taiping's servant. I only recognize my master. Everyone else, regardless of who they are, has nothing to do with this servant." Wu Sanxi was furious. Li Xian hurriedly said, "Hey, this girl really is a bit too cautious. Is there a need to be so guarded against King Liang? However, this girl has good intentions, so I can't refuse. King Liang, please don't get angry over this. When that girl of mine arrives, I'll have her apologize to King Liang." Wu Sanxi's anger turned into a smile. "Forget it. How could this king bicker over such things? Haha, Qilong, you can just call me by my name. There's no need to be so courteous." Li Xian sighed. He slowly swept his gaze over the furnishings in the hall and said sadly, "Things remain the same, but people have changed. All that happened in the past. If I bring it up, it will only make me feel sad. There is no need to bring it up." Wu Sanxi thought to himself, is this guy a fake? Or is he just trying to mislead me because he's wary of me? It's a pity that with those 8 meat screens around, it won't be easy for me to get close to Li Xian. Wu Sanxi laughed and said, "Regardless, Qilong has finally returned to the capital. Qilong must have returned to the capital on Ant's orders. Why don't you immediately enter the palace to see Ant? Why don't Sanxi accompany you back to the city?" Li Xian raised his eyes. A trace of grief and indignation suddenly flashed through his eyes, but it quickly turned into a look of hatred and helplessness. "I have been separated from Mother for 16 years. How could I not want to see her immediately? It's just that I have lived in Huangzhou for many years. These years, I have missed Mother day and night, causing my face to age and my expression to become haggard. Now, because I am in a hurry to return to the capital, I am in a hurry and injure my legs. If I were to enter the palace like this, I'm afraid that Mother will inevitably feel sad for her son. Mother is already old. No matter how unfilial Li Xian is, how could he dare to make Mother sad? Thus, I want to rest here for a few days before returning to the city." Wu Sanxi saw the trace of grief and indignation inadvertently flash through Li Xian's eyes. He somewhat believed that he was Li Xian. Wu Sanxi's eyes darted around. Just as he was about to ask a few more questions, a clear and melodious voice of a girl suddenly rang out. "Father, look, my clothes are beautiful." The voice came to an abrupt stop, as if a string of ice beads had been smashed into a jade plate. The crisp sound was suddenly heard, as if someone had suddenly pressed down on it. Wu Sanxi turned around and saw a young girl running out of the side hall in a lively manner. Her cheeks were rosy like a blooming peach blossom, and her hair was dripping with water. She was carrying a pomegranate skirt embroidered with pleated white flowers. She looked like a happy little swallow. Just a single glance was enough to make one's eyes light up, as if a lantern had quietly exploded in the middle of the night. "This is—" Wu Sanxi stared at this young girl in confusion. The young girl had rushed in excitedly, but when she suddenly saw that there was someone in the hall, she couldn't help but shrink back. She moved closer to Li Xian with the tip of her toes, looking at Wu Sanxi with a timid expression. Li Xian coughed lightly and said, "This is my daughter, Guo-er. She was born on the way to Fang province. King Liang, you have yet to meet her. Guo-er, hurry up and pay your respects to King Liang." Guo-er took a small step forward timidly. She lifted her skirt and quickly curtsied towards Wu Sanxi. She said in a crisp voice, or pays her respects to King Liang. After she finished curtsying, she quickly hid behind Li Xian like a frightened little rabbit. Wu Sanxi's eyes suddenly lit up. This girl was not very old, and she had been born and raised deep in the mountains. She was no different from an ignorant village girl. An innocent and naive young girl like her would easily give herself away. If the Prince of Luling was fake, they would never have allowed her to show herself to me. Moreover, judging from her appearance, the way she ran out, and the expression on her face, it was clear that she was unaware of my arrival. If I want to know whether this Prince of Luling is real or fake, I'm afraid I'll have to rely on her. Wu Sanxi immediately laughed and said with a sincere smile, Your name is Gua, right? He's really a good child. He's so handsome, so fresh and lively. Just by comparing him to my maids, he's like a cloud compared to the others in my family. Gua, your entire family has returned to Luoyang with your father, right? No, my father only brought me back. Li Gua rolled up her clothes in an uneasy manner. Her little face was flushed, and she looked as if she could not bear to interact with strangers. Li Xian urged, Gua, hurry up and return to your room. Look at how you are running out before you've even finished dressing yourself. This is not the mountains. Remember your father's words. You must behave yourself in the future. You can't be so wild anymore. Hurry up and go back. Wait, there's no rush. Wu Sanxi hastily stretched out his hand to stop him. He said to Li Gua, with a smile, Qilong, I have something to say to you. We are all family, so why are you acting so distant? Unfortunately, I did not know that Gua would come with your father, so I did not bring a greeting gift. Look, this is really... Wu Sanxi carelessly felt around his waist and took off a fine jade pendant. He handed it to Li Gua, and said, Here, take this jade pendant as a greeting gift. Hurry up and take it. Li Gua looked a little hesitant. She subconsciously turned around to look at Li Xian. It was the same expression that many children would instinctively ask their parents for advice when they did not know what to do. Wu Sanxi saw her reaction and couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Fake? Humph. Would this little girl ask for his permission to visit the fake Prince of Luling? Does the fake Prince of Luling have the ability to deceive even his own daughter? Yang Fan, don't blame me for being merciless if you continue to persist in going about things the wrong way. Wu Sanxi said with a smile, Hurry up and take it. There's no need to be polite. Our families are relatives, and we have always been close. You can ask your father if you don't believe me. Li Gua immediately turned around and looked at Li Xian with her large, watery eyes. A strange expression suddenly flitted across Li Xian's face. It was hard to tell whether it was anger or fear. He only waved his hand and said, Since it is a gift from King Liang, just take it. Thank you, King Liang. Now return to your room. Oh, Li Gua timidly accepted the jade pendant, bowed slightly to Wu Sanxi, and said in a low voice, Thank you, King Liang. After saying this, Li Gua ran towards the side hall. Just as she was about to reach the entrance, she seemed to recall her father's teachings. Now that you are a princess, you can't act like a wild girl in the wilderness. She couldn't help but stick out her tongue and sneak a glance behind her. Only then did she lighten her footsteps, twist her waist, and slowly walk away like a graceful young lady. Wu Sanxi smiled sinisterly and turned his head around. His eyes were like a pair of knives as he glared fiercely at Yang Fan. Yang Fan's lips suddenly opened and closed. Then he helplessly pursed them and slowly lowered his head, revealing a look of wanting to argue, but unable to speak. But in his heart he laughed and sighed. That seductress even made me fall into her trap. If you think she's a little village girl who doesn't know the ways of the world, then you deserve to be unlucky. Chapter 817. Yao Chong arrived first, but Wei Zhigu was stopped by Wu Qingxi. Wu Qingxi was hurrying after Wu Sanxi when he heard the sound of horse hooves behind him. Turning his head, he saw their banners and knew that the officials from the political affairs hall had arrived. Wu Zetian cleverly built a kind of balanced political relationship in the imperial court. Although this kind of balance was actually abnormal and not equal, with her forceful suppression and mediation at any time, she was able to maintain a kind of delicate balance of power. That was, the political power was handed over to the ministers, and the military power was handed over to the Wu family. Ever since Wu Zetian failed to teach the civet and parrot to coexist peacefully, she once wanted to give the throne to someone with the surname Wu. In the end, she gave up because of the invisible opposition within the country, the stirring of foreign powers, and the fact that the Wu family members were a bunch of useless fools. Wu Zetian had now decided to pass the throne to her son, to someone with the surname Li. But she had usurped the Li family's empire and was worried that her son would restore Zhou to Tang after 100 years, preventing her empire from being passed down for generations. So she wanted to continue this balanced political situation. That was, after 100 years, the Li family would rule the empire and the Wu family would control the military. The Li family would control the empire and could comply with the will of the people within the country. The Wu family would control the army and ensure that her son would not dare to act rashly. The Wu Zhou dynasty that she had created would continue. For this reason, none of the prime ministers of the political affairs hall were from the Wu clan side. Wu Zetian did not reveal this plan to anyone, but because of this, the power in the imperial court was clearly divided. She did not allow the Wu clan to interfere with the political affairs hall. As a result, when Wu Qingxi saw that the people from the political affairs hall had arrived, he knew that they were here to protect the prince of Luling. He immediately ordered his men to move the carriage horizontally and block the road. When Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong arrived, Wu Qingxi smiled and cupped his hands. "Ah, Prime Minister Wei, Prime Minister Yao, you too seem to be in a hurry. Where are you going?" Wei Zhigu returned the greeting with a smile on his horse and said, "So it is your highness, the king of Wei. I and Yuanji have been busy with official business and are tired. I suddenly remembered the hot spring water on Dragon Gate Mountain. It has the effect of relieving one's fatigue and refreshing one's mind. I heard that His Highness Wei Wang has been feeling unwell recently. Looking at Wei Wang's complexion, he is indeed ill. Instead of resting in the residence, where are you going?" Wu Qingxi coughed twice and replied with a smile, "What a coincidence! This prince is also heading for Dragon's Gate." It was recorded in the commentary on the Water Classic. The imperial maiden soup can cure all diseases. This prince's illness is a chronic disease. I have tried to treat it with medicine, but there is no effect. Therefore, I want to go to the Dragon Gate to see if the hot spring water is effective. Since the two prime ministers are also going to the Dragon Gate, why don't we go together? Wei Zhigu and Wu Qingxi both knew what the other party's goal was, but they didn't say it out loud. Shedding all pretense of cordiality was a big taboo in the officialdom. It was normal for people to stab you in the back while being friendly in front of you. As the saying goes, when one walks to the end of the line, one sits and watches the clouds rise. Who knows what will happen next? First, they are trapped in an irreversible situation. If the situation turns against them, they will be in a passive position. On the other hand, as long as this layer of cordiality is not shed, no matter how absurd a reason is, you can still insist on this reason when the situation is disadvantageous. Yao Chong laughed and said, "It is getting late. Why don't Duke Wei and I go first and inform the people up there to make some preparations in advance? This way, when Wei Wang reaches the mountain, he won't have to prepare meals and bedding in the dark." Wu Qingxi smiled and said, "No problem. This prince has already sent someone up the mountain. Someone come. Send another person to inform the people up there that Prime Minister Wei and Prime Minister Yao will be coming up the mountain today. They want the supervisor of the hot spring to make early preparations." Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong were secretly anxious. They looked at each other but couldn't think of a reason to leave in a huff. Di Renjia was in a hurry on the soft sedan chair. Every time he traveled a certain distance, The burly and strong bodyguards would take turns to carry the sedan chair so as to ensure the speed. The officials would spur their horses to follow behind. There was nothing they could do. Based on their official positions, prestige, and qualifications, it would be pointless for them to go. Although Di Renjia looked like he was on the verge of death, as long as he was still breathing, this veteran of 4 dynasties would be able to control the situation. As they were traveling, they suddenly heard the sound of hooves. Di Renjia happened to wake up at this moment. Hearing the sound, he turned his eyes and saw a group of 3 horses passing by them without stopping. Di Renjia only saw that the 3 people seemed to be women, and they are wearing shallow dew on their heads. Di Renjia's lips opened and closed a few times. Di Guangyuan, who was accompanying him, hurriedly said, "Father, that woman is wearing shallow dew on her head and passed by in a hurry. I don't know who she is." The corner of Di Renjia's mouth lifted slightly, and his lips moved a few more times. Di Guangyuan hurriedly ordered everyone to stop. He bent down and placed his ear next to his father's mouth and heard a sentence with a smile. "It's peace, peace has arrived, peace." Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong were being held back by Wu Qingxi and had no other choice but to follow him. Wu Qingxi purposely slowed down and let Wei Zhigu use the excuse that it was getting late to rush them. He refused to rest. Wei Zhigu was so anxious that his eyebrows were on fire. Suddenly he had an idea and cried out, "Aya! I forgot to remind you that I'm a vegetarian for the next few days. I can't eat meat, and I can't put any oil in my dishes either. Yuanji, I'll have to trouble you to go ahead and inform them on my behalf." As Wei Zhigu spoke, he signaled to Yao Chong with his eyes. Yao Chong understood and immediately whipped his horse. When the horse had already charged out, he shouted, "Don't worry, Duke Wei. Your Highness, I will go first." "Ah, cough, cough, cough." Wu Qingxi was so anxious that he started coughing before he could say a word. When he caught his breath, Yao Chong had already disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Wei Zhigu chuckled and said to Wu Qingxi, "Don't be anxious, Duke. This servant will follow Duke slowly. You and I will chat along the way." Wu Qingxi coughed anxiously and cursed in his heart, this old man. On Dragon Gate Mountain, Wu Sanxi had used a clever scheme. From the reaction of the ignorant and innocent Li Guo, he found out that the Prince of Luling on Dragon Gate Mountain was the real Prince of Luling. He couldn't help but feel relieved. But on his way here, there were hundreds of cavalry, martial monks, internal guards, and the 8 female guards of Princess Taiping. How could he succeed even if he attacked by force? Just as he was hesitating, someone came to report, "Mr. Yao of the Political Affairs Hall is here to bathe in the hot springs at Dragon Gate Mountain." He was pleased to hear that the Prince of Luling has returned and specially came to pay his respects. Wu Sanxi cursed in his heart, "This Yao Yuanji, copying my words." Li Xian happily invited him in. A moment later, Yao Chong entered the main hall. The moment he saw Li Xian, he immediately paid his respects. Yao Chong and Li Xian had never met before. This was the first time the 2 of them had met, so they didn't have much to say. It was just a normal greeting between officials. But once Yao Chong arrived, he didn't leave. He sat down with Wu Sanxi and talked about all sorts of things, but he didn't lift his butt. As long as the matter could be covered up, even if he caused a huge disaster, for the future of the Wu clan, his aunt would protect him, just like how she protected Wu Yizong. But if he publicly killed a prince in front of the prime minister, this matter wouldn't be able to be covered up. There wouldn't even be a piece of cloth to cover it up. Then Wu Zetian would have to sacrifice him. So even if Wu Sanxi could openly kill his way in, he wouldn't be able to do it. Wu Sanxi was filled with resentment. After a moment's deliberation, he cupped his hands and said to Li Xian, "Sanxi, just arrived at the mountain. I heard that the Prince of Luling had returned, so I came to visit. I haven't settled down in the palace yet, so I'll take my leave first. I'll hold a banquet tonight and enjoy myself with my 7th husband." Li Xian hurriedly had 2 female sumo wrestlers help him up and bid farewell. Yao Chong also stood up. Wu Sansi chuckled and turned to leave. Yang Fan hurriedly said, "I'll send King Liang off in His Highness' place." Yang Fan followed Wu Sansi out. Wu Sansi ran as fast as he could, and Yang Fan quickly caught up to him. He whispered, "His Highness, please don't be fooled. That really wasn't the Prince of Luling. His Highness, His Highness." Wu Sansi strode out of the Prince of Luling's residence. With a flick of his sleeve, he swaggered off, completely ignoring Yang Fan. Yang Fan stood at the entrance in a daze, staring at Wu Sansi's departing figure with a dejected expression. When he slowly turned around and returned to the courtyard, the corners of his lips curled into a smile. With light footsteps, he walked back to the main hall. Li Deong chased after Wu Sansi and asked anxiously, "His Highness, how is it?" Wu Sansi said in a deep voice, "This Luling is the real deal. Immediately, send some men back to the city. While the city gates are still open, bring over our most skilled men. Attacking by force is impossible. Luling doesn't dare to enter the city and is currently waiting for news from the palace. If we want to kill him, we have to do it tonight." Li Deong heard the urgency in his words and had no time to ask any more questions. He hurriedly agreed and went down the mountain to make the arrangements. Once Yao Chong left, Wei Jigu was no longer in a hurry. He leisurely strolled along, chatting with Wu Qingxi about all sorts of things. Just as they were about to advance, 3 women wearing shallow headscarves suddenly rushed over on horseback. The 3 women were all dressed in palace robes, with sharp swords hanging from their waists and black, shallow headscarves on their heads. They did not even stop as they sped past the group of people. Among the 3 female riders, when the one in the middle rode past them, she turned her head slightly and glanced at them. The night wind blew and lifted a corner of her veil. Her beautiful face flashed and disappeared again. Wu Qingxi's body shook, and he cried out, "Taiping!" Wei Jigu narrowed his eyes and pressed his ears together, asking loudly, "What did His Highness say?" Wu Qingxi gritted his teeth and shouted angrily at his subordinates, "What are you all dilly-dallying for? It's such a short distance from the city to Dragon's Gate, and you're still dilly-dallying? Faster, faster!" Yao Chong had left first, and Wu Qingxi was already secretly worried. He only hoped that Wu Sansi would succeed before Yao Chong arrived. Now that Princess Taiping had also left, he did not know what the situation on the mountain was like, but he did not want to wait any longer. With the order, the troops immediately sped up like bulls. Wei Jigu said, "AI, Prince Wei, why are you in such a hurry? Let's chat slowly. If it gets late, it will be a wonderful thing to hold a lantern and visit Dragon's Gate at night. Did you say that your coral tree was 6 feet or 7 feet tall? His Highness? His Highness." Watching Wu Qingxi's carriage leave in a hurry, Wei Jigu chuckled and ordered his subordinates to speed up as well. At this time, the Empress of the Eastern Palace, Zhang Yiji, and the concubine of the Western Palace, Zhang Changzong, had just received the Emperor's edict and led a group of palace guards south along Dingding Street. They had just left Dingding Gate. Chapter 818. Yao Chang's purpose in coming up the mountain today was to ensure the safety of the Prince of Luling. With his status as the current Prime Minister, as long as he stayed by the Prince of Luling's side, Wu Sansi would not be able to make a public move. Even if an assassination was made known to everyone, it was still an assassination. If it turned into a coup, it would be out of control. At present, Wu Sansi did not have the courage to do so. Wu Sansi left, but Yao Chong didn't leave either. It was just that he really wasn't familiar with the Prince of Luling. While the 2 of them were chatting, 100 guards came in from outside the hall to report that Princess Taiping had arrived. Hearing this, Yao Chong was even more relieved. Li Xian also put on a pleasantly surprised expression, hurriedly saying, "Quick, invite her in." Saying this, Li Xian struggled to get up and had 2 female sumo wrestlers support him toward the front of the hall. Princess Taiping's footsteps were hurried, and as soon as she arrived in the courtyard, she took off her light dew. At this moment, Li Xian was already standing in front of the hall, looking at her with an excited expression. Yang Fan rubbed his nose and quietly turned his face away. However, Princess Taiping did not notice him. As soon as she entered the courtyard, she saw Li Xian standing in front of the hall, supported by 2 of her female guards. Qilong, elder brother. Taiping only called out once before tears streamed down her cheeks. Gu Zhuting had already received Yang Fan's orders. If they could hide it, then they had to hide it from Princess Taiping as well. This was to prevent Taiping from revealing any flaws in her expression after learning the truth. Therefore, she could only brace herself and pretend to be excited. Sighing, she said, "Taiping, I did not think that elder brother would live to see you one day." Taiping held his hands and carefully examined him, seeing that his face still had some of the charm of the past, but he was truly too old and haggard. She could not help but weep in sadness. Princess Taiping gently hugged him, sobbing, "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. Elder brother has suffered. You and I, brother and sister, have reunited and will never be separated again. This is a happy occasion. Sister, don't cry. Elder brother, don't be sad." Taiping lifted his sleeve and gently wiped away his tears. His heart suddenly sank as he suddenly thought of something. She was too carried away just now. Only now did she remember that her brother's hands were soft like cotton, but not broad. His palms were very delicate, just like a woman's palms. He was completely different from the brother in her memory. Gu Zhuting could disguise her appearance, and even her skin color very well. She could also use special drugs to imitate the folds on her palms. However, her hands were the most commonly used parts of her body, so she couldn't disguise them too much. Her size, fat, and thin couldn't be disguised. A person who hasn't seen each other for many years can go through all kinds of changes. But no matter how much he changes, it's impossible for the thickness of his finger bones to shrink, right? Princess Taiping muttered to herself. Her heart was filled with suspicion. She couldn't help but look for Yang Fan while wiping her tears. Princess Taiping was not aware of the fact that along the way Yang Fan had deliberately deployed troops to mislead them and fought the assassins with fake and real moves. This matter was only known to Wu Sanxi and Wu Qingxi, the 2 people who had learned the details from the spies. Taiping only knew that it must have been very difficult for Yang Fan to escort the Prince of Luling all the way to the Dragon Gate, but she knew nothing about the twists and turns. Fortunately, she didn't know anything, so when she saw Li Xian, she didn't arouse any suspicions at all. Otherwise, with her familiarity with her brother and knowing that there was a fake Li Xian in the past, she would have already determined that this person was definitely a fake. But even though she couldn't come to a conclusion at the moment, because of the strange feeling when she held her brother's hand, she became suspicious. Turning her head, she saw Yang Fan's gaze. Looking at her gaze, Yang Fan knew something was wrong. Taiping was already suspicious. No matter how brilliant this disguise technique was, it couldn't fool people who were too familiar with it, especially after being in close contact with it. But at this moment he had no way to explain it, so he could only give Princess Taiping a look. Princess Taiping couldn't tell what he was trying to tell her from his look, but she understood that there must be something hidden in it. Therefore, she remained calm and collected, still holding Li Xian's hand, and said softly, "Brother is injured? Why is it so inconvenient for you to move? Sister, help brother to sit down. Let's have a good chat." Princess Taiping helped Gu Zhuting to the center of the hall. She touched her hand and then caressed her wrist. Gu Zhuting was a woman after all, so her wrist bones couldn't be as thick as Li Xian's. Seeing the look in Yang Fan's eyes and caressing Gu Zhuting's wrist, Taiping had already concluded that this was a fake and couldn't help but be secretly shocked. She didn't know that there was such a marvelous disguise technique in the world. She only thought that Yang Fan found someone who looked similar to her brother Li Xian to pretend to be him. She couldn't help being surprised and thought to herself, "This is a fake? If he isn't Qilong, then where is my brother?" Could it be that something happened to him? Princess Taiping immediately panicked, but she immediately thought of Yang Fan's calm expression and steadied herself. No. Looking at Fan Lang's expression, Qilong must be fine. So, Fan Lang deliberately found someone who looked like my brother to attract people who wanted to harm him? Princess Taiping's guess was almost correct, although the process was 100 times more complicated and tortuous than she had imagined. It was exactly the purpose. After Princess Taiping made her judgment, she lost interest in this fake Li Xian. However, there was still Yao Chong in the hall, so she didn't want to reveal any flaws. She still helped Gu Zhuting to sit down while she sat down on the side. After exchanging a few polite words with Yao Chong, she began to chat with the fake Li Xian, asking him about his sister-in-law and his family, as if they were reuniting after a long separation. Gu Zhuting felt very uncomfortable. Other people couldn't see it, but as the person involved, she could clearly feel that Princess Taiping's expression had changed. She must have seen some clues and was only playing along with her. Perhaps what Princess Taiping wanted to do the most right now was to catch Yang Fan and ask him for an explanation. Gu Zhuting said, "Taiping, I came back to the capital in a hurry, so I didn't have time to bring my family back. I only brought my youngest daughter. Her name is Gua. She was born on the way to Fangzhou. As her aunt, you haven't seen her yet. She knows that she has an aunt like you and has always wanted to see you. Yang Xiaowei, accompany the princess to see Gua. Yang Fan quickly bowed and said, "Yes, your humble servant obeys." Yao Chong was slightly surprised. Although this little Junju grew up in the mountains, she was still a Junju. How could she let a man lead the princess to her bedchamber? He turned around and saw the few female sumo wrestlers who were still guarding Prince of Luling. He suddenly understood. Special times call for special treatment. Yao Chong consciously looked for an excuse for the inappropriateness of the situation. At that time, Yang Fan had already led Princess Taiping to the side hall. The palace pavilions here were surrounded and nested like a maze. It was not easy for people who entered for the first time to distinguish between north, south, east, and west. Yang Fan led Princess Taiping around a small, winding corridor and passed through a courtyard. There were also internal guards in the courtyard here, but the number was obviously less than the previous one. After all, Prince of Luling was the main focus of protection. The two flashed into a room and avoided the internal guard's line of sight. Princess Taiping immediately grabbed Yang Fan's hand and asked anxiously, "Erlang, isn't that my elder brother? Where did you hide my elder brother?" Silence. Yang Fan looked around cautiously and said in a low voice, "Prince of Luling is still in danger as long as he doesn't enter the city." Princess Taiping was enlightened by his words and tried to calm down. She stared at him while restraining her anxiety, waiting for him to reveal the truth. Yang Fan said, "Along the way, thousands of words can't be explained in a short time. I will tell you in detail when we get back. In short, we have gone through countless hardships and dangers to arrive here. Seeing that success is at hand, I dare not be careless. That's why I am protecting the imperial entourage here. Admittedly, it is because I have no choice but to block the front and the back, but also because I want your highness to be as safe as possible when entering the city." Princess Taiping's eyes brightened. She asked anxiously, "You mean?" Yang Fan leaned close to her ear and whispered a few words. Princess Taiping was both happy and worried when she heard it. Wringing her wrist, she sighed and said, "If I had known earlier, I would have stayed in the city to take care of him when necessary." Yang Fan said, "If you didn't come, they would definitely be suspicious. You are Prince of Luling's younger sister. Now that you have come up the mountain, will they still be suspicious?" "Yes, Prince of Luling is not here, but the battlefield is here. The more lively the battle is, the safer Prince of Luling will be. At this point, the key to success is not how your highness enters the city, but whether we can successfully attract all of them here. Princess Taiping had calmed down. She nodded lightly and said, "I understand." Yang Fan said with a smile, "It's good that you understand. Then accompany me to put on a good show." Princess Taiping said gratefully, "Erlang, you are the great benefactor of my Li family. Your kindness is higher than the heavens. Thank you." Yang Fan said with a smile, "Whether it is public or private, there is no need to say thank you to me." Princess Taiping's heart warmed. She suddenly stood on her tiptoes and wrapped her arms around Yang Fan's neck. She planted a firm kiss on his lips. Yang Fan hurriedly raised his hand to wipe his mouth. Princess Taiping stared at him with her beautiful big eyes and said angrily, "What are you doing?" Yang Fan said, "There is no room for mistakes at this crucial moment. Don't let anyone see through it." Princess Taiping rolled her eyes at him and said snappily, "What does this matter have to do with my brother making a mistake?" Yang Fan was stunned and said, "That's right. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with it." He laughed self-deprecatingly and shook his head. "I am a little paranoid now." He wiped his lips again and said to Princess Taiping, "Come, I will take you to see Guo. She is real." Princess Taiping was very curious about this niece, whom she had never met before. She hurriedly followed Yang Fan forward. Yang Fan walked to Li Guo's residence. He stretched out his hand and was about to knock on the door when he was suddenly startled. He suddenly remembered the romantic debt between him and Li Guo on Huangjuling. He had been extremely nervous along the way. Every day he had been plotting how to fight against the assassins. He had exhausted his brain power and energy to think about other things. It was only now that he remembered. Li Guo is Princess Taiping's niece. The hairs on the back of Yang Fan's neck stood up with a schwa sound. Princess Taiping saw that he was looking at the door without moving. She could not help but asked curiously, "What is it?" Oh, nothing. I suddenly thought of something else." Yang Fan answered in a hurry. He stepped forward and knocked lightly on the door. Yang Fan was afraid that Li Guo would suddenly call out Brother Yang when she heard his voice. So he knocked on the door and immediately explained the purpose of his visit in one breath. "Knock, knock. Little Canton Princess, Her Highness Princess Taiping, is here and wants to see you." Chapter 819. Li Guo gently twisted her waist and looked at the mirror, behaving playfully. There was a full-length bronze mirror in her residence. The commoner girl's attire was actually far from being gorgeous, but for Li Guo, who lived on the yellow bamboo ridge and could only wear her older sister's old clothes since she was young, a new dress was enough to make her overjoyed. Not to mention, this style and color to her was already as beautiful as a fairy's dress. After successfully deceiving Wu Sansi in the front hall, this young actor returned to the side hall where she lived and hung the jade pendant on her waist in high spirits. She twisted her waist in front of the mirror and admired the effect. Although the jade pendant was precious, it was not a ring pendant worn by a girl. Moreover, she was wearing a civilian girl's dress, so it was very incongruous on her body. Li Guo looked around for a long time and felt that it was not suitable, so she regretfully took off the jade pendant. Just as she climbed onto the couch and hid the jade pendant, Yang Fan's voice came from outside the door. Hearing Yang Fan's voice, Li Guo did not blurt out Brother Yang as he had feared. This little girl was far more scheming than Yang Fan had imagined. Although Yang Fan had experienced her fierceness, because of her tender and pure appearance, he often thought that she was too simple, separated by a door, who knew who was outside, so she would not call out randomly. Yang Fan spoke very fast, but fortunately, he deliberately lowered his voice. At this moment, on the Dragon Gate Mountain, where the wind was blowing and the cranes were crying, Princess Taiping only thought that he was nervous and did not think much about it. "Princess Taiping!" Li Guer had naturally heard of this aunt and knew that she was the most favored daughter of the emperor's grandmother. When the emperor's grandfather was alive, he also doted on this daughter the most. It was said that when she got married, the torch even burned the trees along the way. In order to let the spacious wedding carriage pass, she even had to tear down the walls of the square. All of this made Li Guer yearn for it. She quickly got up from the couch and ran quickly to open the door. Princess Taiping stood in front of the door and looked at the little beauty in front of her. Her glossy black hair was combed into 2 buns. Her hair was combed into 2 large buns, thin, neat, and smooth. After it was combed into 2 symmetrical buns, a bundle hung down from each side, flowing over her shoulders, all the way to her chest. She was wearing a short jacket with narrow sleeves in light red and dark patterns, and a silk skirt with hundreds of pleated flowers, which accentuated her slim waist. Princess Taiping's eyes brightened at the sight of those picturesque facial features. Princess Taiping could not help but smile fondly. "You are Bao Er?" As expected of the daughter of my Li family. She is truly beautiful beyond compare. Li Guer was also looking at Princess Taiping. The woman in front of her had a noble temperament that made people feel ashamed of their inferiority. Her hair was combed into a high bun. It was a hairstyle that she had never seen before. It looked incomparably complex and elegant. The pearls and golden phoenix ornaments on the bun made her look high and mighty, making people look up to her. Her long neck, her towering chest. The material was luxurious and bright, the colorful clothes that were so beautiful that it took one's breath away. Everything made Li Guer feel suffocated. Princess Taiping looked at her with a smile. Her eyes opened wider and wider, filled with envy. Princess Taiping smiled and called out, "Bao Er." Princess. And Bao Er was stunned by Princess Taiping's mature charm and noble temperament. She could not help but stutter when she spoke. "That's right, I am Taiping, your aunt." Princess Taiping held Bao Er's hand and looked at her from head to toe. The more she looked, the more she liked her. She nodded repeatedly and said, "Beautiful, beautiful. At such a young age, you have already grown into such a beauty. When Aunt was young, people called me the peony of Luoyang. But after seeing your beauty today, Aunt cannot be compared to you. Our Li family has produced a peony of the world." Li Guer blushed from her praise. She said obediently, "Bao Er is only a silly little girl. How can I be compared to Aunt's beauty? When I saw you earlier, Bao Er was stunned. Bao Er is a woman, and she is already like this. I wonder how all the men in the world would fall head over heels for Aunt when they see her. If even a fairy-like person like Aunt says that she is old, are there still any beauties in the prime of their youth in the world?" Princess Taiping was amused by Li Guer's words and laughed. She pinched her pink cheeks and said, "This sweet little mouth of yours is especially adorable. Aunt, niece. Aunt, which side do I belong to? The difference in seniority. Yang Fan watched from the side. He broke out in cold sweat. He saw the 2 of them talking and laughing. He did not know whether to leave or stand. His throat felt itchy, and he could not help but cough. Princess Taiping thought that he was reminding her not to flatter Li Guer. She could not help but roll her eyes at him. She straightened her pretty face and said, "What?" Yang Fan hurriedly said with a guilty conscience, "Nothing. Oh, it's like this. Prince Liang just said that he wants to invite the Prince of Luling to a drink tonight. I am afraid that there is a trap. I hope that princess will be careful." Li Guer looked at the expressions and actions of the 2 people and thought to herself, "Looking at Brother Yang's appearance, he seems to be very familiar with my auntie. And he doesn't seem to regard him as an outsider at all. He is the emperor's confidant of grandmother's confidant of the emperor's confidant of the emperor. It is normal that he is familiar with my aunt. Although father has returned to the capital, it seems that the Wu family will not let him go. My family will need to rely on Brother Yang for many things in the future. Fortunately I became his woman. This man, I really want to catch him. When Liguerre thought of this, she suddenly remembered the beautiful scenery in the wisteria cave on the yellow bamboo ridge. She was still young and not very interested in the matters between men and women. She had been rushing about and was often in danger, so she did not have time to think about these things. Now that she suddenly thought of it, her pretty face could not help but blush. When she looked at Yang Fan again, her eyes seemed to be dripping with tears. Fortunately, Princess Taiping was attracted by Yang Fan's words and did not pay attention to her expression. Otherwise, with Princess Taiping's experience and cleverness, she might have seen some clues. You said that Wu Sansi wants to hold a banquet to entertain my elder brother? Yes. I am afraid that it will not be a good banquet. What is there to be afraid of? Wu Sansi's banquet is definitely a hangmen banquet. No, we cannot let him have his way. Immediately give the order to prepare a few banquet tables. If he wants to drink, invite him over. Okay. Standing in front of this beautiful couple, Yang Fan really felt frightened. When he heard this, he felt as if he had been granted amnesty and immediately said, I will go and arrange it. Princess Taiping nodded and said, Be careful in the kitchen. You must use reliable people and also some clever people to keep an eye on it. Yang Fan said, I know. After saying this, he hurriedly left. Princess Taiping turned around and held Li Guerre's little hand. She smiled and said, Let's go. Tonight your father is holding a banquet. There are many people coming to the banquet. You are my family's princess. It is not good to wear such clothes. Aunt has a palace in the Dragon's Gate. There are some clothes there. Go and pick some for you. When Liguerre saw Princess Taiping's incomparably gorgeous clothes, her eyes were already shining. When she heard this, she happily agreed. Princess Taiping held her hand and walked with a smile. Your body is not fully grown yet. The clothes may look a little big. It does not matter. Just make some changes and deal with today's situation. Yang Fan, because of your past achievements, I have been lenient. I did not expect you to be so stubborn. I have already confided in you, but you still try to deceive me. That Princess Taiping is Li Xian's sister. She is Yang Fan's mistress. How could she not know the truth of your plan? How could she not recognize her own brother? She is willing to abandon the real Li Xian and come to this Dragon's Gate mountain. If I do not kill you, I am not a human. Wu Sansi sat in the palace room that belonged to him. He angrily pounded the table. His face was black and his hair was fluttering. He had already turned into a black-faced Zhang Fei. His henchmen stood on both sides. When they saw their lord was angry, they could not help but keep quiet out of fear. Wu Sansi rolled his eyes and shouted, Ji Zubing, your subordinate is here. A tall and slender warrior with reclining silkworm eyebrows, red phoenix eyes, a square face, scarlet cheeks, a green turban on his head, and 5 locks of long beard on his chin immediately stepped forward and cupped his fists. Looking at his stalwart figure and appearance, he looked like the Marquis of Hansho Pavilion, Guan Yunchang. He had the nickname Duke of Beautiful Beard. Unfortunately, he did not use a saber, but a sword. Wu Sansi said, Tonight, this prince is holding a banquet to entertain the Prince of Luling. I order you to perform a sword dance in front of the hall to help with the wine. When the time comes, you, Ji Zubing, was greatly alarmed. Your Highness, Princess Taiping and Master Yao are here. I am afraid it is inappropriate to do this in front of so many people. Wu Sansi glared. Who said I want you to assassinate him? Ji Zubing let out a sigh of relief. With a face full of smiles, he said, It is only a sword dance, why not? This subordinate's swordsmanship has once received a few pointers from General Pei of Chong, and, speaking of which, I can be considered half a disciple of General Pei. Back then, Wu Sansi impatiently waved his hand and said, all right, don't talk about these useless things. When this prince orders you to perform a sword dance, Pretend to let go of your sword and kill the Prince of Luling. Ji Zubing was shocked. Isn't that still an assassination? Wu Sansi said, How can it be considered an assassination? A slip. Do you understand? This is a slip. This is his fate. He deserves to be unlucky. As long as the emperor has an excuse, a way out of this embarrassing situation, who cares if the world believes it or not? She will have to admit that it was a slip. Is she going to announce to the world that her nephew coveted the throne and killed her son? Ji Zubing mumbled. Then what happens after the slip? Wu Sansi said, What afterwards? After the slip, he will die. Ji Zubing stammered. This subordinate is asking, What should this subordinate do? Wu Sansi raised his hand and threw a wine cup over. Ji Zubing leaned to the side, and the wine cup flew past the tip of his nose. His skill was truly not bad. Wu Sansi roared, Don't you have legs? After causing a great disaster by mistake, of course you have to escape. Once the matter is settled, won't you come back? When this prince becomes the emperor, will you still be short of your contributions? Ji Zubing's face was ashen as he said, The Prince of Luling probably won't fall for the method Lu Xiu used, right? Wu Sansi angrily said, Bullshit! Ignorant and incompetent thing. Is this the method Lu Xiu used? This is Lu Bang, this is Xian Yu, this is Fan Zeng. Why am I telling you all this, you cowardly thing? Seeing that the wine cup was gone, Wu Sansi picked up the wine pot and threw it at Ji Zubing again. Ji Zubing leaned to the side and dodged it again. Chapter 8:20. Wu Sansi went crazy from anger and roared, You dare to hide? You dare to hide? Seeing how he was looking around, it seemed like he was going to throw the table away if he couldn't find something to throw. A thin and pale guard at the side couldn't stand it any longer and came forward to persuade. Your Highness, please calm down. Your Highness's plan is too obvious. After all, the Prince of Luling was ambushed earlier, and he also knows that those assassins were sent by Your Highness, so how could he not be on guard? Your Highness also said that he has many experts around him. As long as he is on guard, it will be impossible for the sword dance to succeed. This person's words were logical, and Wu Sansi's anger gradually subsided. He glanced at him and said, Yin Chongsheng, what kind of brilliant plan do you have? If it succeeds, this king will remember you as a great merit. Yin Chongsheng sneered, Use poison. This subordinate believes that rather than fighting with strength, why not use wits? Your Highness only needs to poison the cup and then offer it to the Prince of Luling. He won't dare to publicly fall out with Your Highness, so will he drink the wine or not? As long as Your Highness does it cleverly, he won't be able to see any suspicious points. Even if he has doubts, he will have to brace himself and drink it. At that time, Yin Chongsheng proudly said, It's true that the wine is poisoned, but who saw that it was Your Highness who poisoned it? There must be an assassin framing Your Highness. In order to keep this matter a secret, the Emperor hasn't announced to the world that he has summoned the Prince of Luling back to the capital. This way, if the world has doubts, who will they suspect? The Emperor has never treated the Prince of Luling well. All the guards' eyes lit up. Ji Zubing said cheerfully, Brilliant plan! Brilliant plan! Brother Yin is truly worthy of being the little Zhuge. This is a brilliant plan. When the time comes, the Emperor won't be able to explain himself, and the world will think that the Emperor is worried about the Prince of Luling. So he summoned him back to the capital and ordered my nephew to bestow a cup of poison wine on his behalf. At that time, even if it's just for His Majesty's own reputation, His Majesty will do his best to clear Your Highness's name. Brilliant plan! Brilliant plan! Brilliant my ass! If this plan works, this prince might as well kill him with a fart. Wu Sansi was so angry that he trembled. It was precisely because he was so guarded against me that I had no choice but to assassinate him. When I failed to assassinate him, I tried to kill him with my sword in front of the banquet. Not to mention a toast. Even if this prince gave him a mouthful of food, he would definitely not eat it. If he wanted to refuse, there were many ways. Furthermore, what about the poison? Which one of you carries poison with you? The guards looked at each other in dismay. Wu Sansi cursed. You're all a bunch of useless trash. You usually brag that you're omnipotent, but when this king really needs you. Just as Wu Sansi was cursing with all his might, someone came in to report, Your Highness, the Prince of Luling has sent someone with an invitation. Wu Sansi was stunned and asked curiously, Invitation? What invitation did he send? The guard presented the invitation with both hands and said, Prince Luling and Princess Taiping are holding a banquet, inviting Your Highness to attend. Wu Sansi's eyes widened. Inside and outside the courtyard where the Prince of Luling, Li Xian, lived, lanterns were hung up, brightly illuminating the place. Li Xian, supported by 2 female sumo wrestlers, stood at the entrance with Princess Taiping to welcome Wu Sansi. Wu Sansi resentfully said, 7th Lang has returned from afar, so this king should be holding a banquet to welcome 7th Lang. Why is 7th Lang inviting me instead? Princess Taiping replied with a smile, We're all family, so why is there a need for such etiquette? 7th Lang's return to the capital is a joyous occasion, and King Liang's coincidental meeting is another joyous occasion. Actually, Taiping is the host tonight. Haha, the mountain is simple and crude, so King Liang should not find fault with Taiping. Wu Sansi put on a fake smile and said, How could that be? It's inconvenient for the Prince of Luling to walk, so let's go in. Ha ha ha. King Liang has gone ahead of you. Prince of Luling, Princess Taiping. This Yao pays his respects. Just as Wu Sansi was about to step forward, Yao Chong jumped out from some corner as if he had just arrived, beaming with joy as he bowed to them. Princess Taiping and Gu Zhuting hurriedly returned the greeting, while Wu Sansi stood to the side and looked at them impatiently. After exchanging pleasantries, everyone sat down in the hall and began chatting with some fresh fruits. After a while, someone came to report that King of Wei, Wu Qingxi, and Prime Minister Wei Zhigu had arrived. Li Xian and his sister came out to welcome them once more. Wu Sansi looked at Yao Chong and chuckled. Prime Minister Yao, you really came at the right time today. Yao Chong smiled. Not only did this Yao come at the right time, King Liang also came at the right time. King of Wei and Duke of Wei have come as well. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens for us to meet here. Wu Sansi snorted coldly. Just as he was about to reply, a heart-wrenching cough came from the courtyard. The 2 of them turned their heads and saw Li Xian and Princess Taiping accompanying Wu Qingxi and Wei Zhigu through the doorway. Wu Qingxi was being supported by an imperial guard, coughing while covering his mouth with a handkerchief. Wu Sansi and Yao Chong stood up and exchanged pleasantries. Wei Zhigu very naturally sat next to Yao Chong. Both of them were prime ministers, but he was slightly older. Yao Chong hurriedly gave way and invited him to take the seat of honor. Wu Qingxi was supported to Wu Sansi's side. Wu Sansi sat there without moving. Wu Qingxi thought that he was Wu Sansi's older cousin, yet Wu Sansi insisted on sitting above him. He was very displeased. However, the 2 of them now had a common enemy, so it was not convenient for him to express his thoughts. Everyone chatted for a while more before Princess Taiping ordered for the banquet to begin. Since the banquet was attended by either the princes or the prime ministers, they were all elders. Li Tang's imperial family did not have that many strict rules, so Li Xian ordered for Li Gua to come out and accompany him. Li Gua had already changed into a set of Princess Taiping's clothes. It was indeed a little too big. Even with the skillful sewing and adjusting it in time, it was still not very fitting. However, such a bright and beautiful set of clothes was very different from the civilian girl's attire. Gua could not bear to change back. Fortunately, her beauty and radiance were unparalleled. Not to mention that this set of clothes was only slightly too big. Even if she was draped in a gunny sack, it would not be able to conceal her dazzling radiance. When such a beauty sat next to Li Xian, everyone's eyes brightened and the room was filled with a sense of radiance. Gua bowed to each of the elders. Her cute and obedient manner earned the compliments of the two princes and the two prime ministers. Gua had never received so many compliments from so many important people, especially Wei Zhigu and Yao Chong, who were both prime ministers with a belly full of knowledge. Their words and sentences were elegant and elegant. Gua had never heard anyone appraise her in such a way before. She was overjoyed and her face blushed. When she obediently returned to her father's side and sat down, it was the three princes, the two prime ministers, and the princess's turn. Wu Qingxi had just arrived and had not had the time to communicate with Wu Sanxi. He wanted to test the waters and ascertain whether this Li Xian was real or not. However, when he saw that Taiping, Wei Zhigu, and Yao Chong were all standing guard here, he was 70% sure in his heart. With Taiping and Gui, the pair of big and small demons who were familiar with everything about Li Xian, there was no way Gu Zhuting would reveal any flaws. Wu Qingxi resisted the urge to cough as he probed for a while, but he did not notice any abnormalities. After 3 rounds of drinking, someone suddenly came to report that Di Renjie had come up the mountain. When Li Xian heard this, he quickly led his sister and daughter out to welcome him. While they were out, Wu Qingxi turned sideways and whispered to Wu Sanxi, "How is it?" Wu Sanxi said gloomily, "You don't have to try any more. This Li Xian is the real one." Oh, Wu Qingxi did not have the time to ask for the reason. Wu Qingxi had already determined that this person was Li Xian. Since Wu Sanxi said so, he was even more certain of his belief. Wu Qingxi said, "Since Taiping is here, I'm afraid the emperor will know about it." Wu Sanxi said fiercely, "This little wench, she married into the Wu family, but she is siding with an outsider." Wu Qingxi said calmly, "What's the point of saying all this now? Since the emperor knows about it, he will probably send someone to pick them up tomorrow morning. When that time comes, the world will know. Returning from Luling to the city will be protected by these 100 cavalry, internal guards, and Princess Taiping's people. Outside, there will be a guard of honor sent by the palace. The journey is short and time is tight. Even if there are people among them, they will not have a chance to act." Wu Sanxi said, "That's right. If we want to act, we can only do it tonight." Wu Qingxi said, "Do you have an idea?" Wu Sanxi shook his head. Wu Qingxi frowned and stroked his beard in deep thought. On the opposite side, Yao Chong also whispered to Wei Zhigu, "The princess has already reported to the emperor about Luling coming to the capital. The emperor will send someone over immediately, but it is impossible for them to return to the city now. Not to mention the fact that the city is under curfew. Even if they make an exception to open the gates for Luling, it will be more dangerous to travel at night. Secondly, the princes are already at the foot of the imperial city, yet they still want to enter the city at night. The imperial court cannot afford to lose face. I think they will have to spend the night on Dragon's Gate Mountain." Wei Zhigu laughed coldly. Not only is the emperor more suspicious and vain, from this point of view, her control over the imperial court has already. Yao Chong smiled slightly. "Isn't this a good thing for us? However, let's not talk about it. Tonight, if I wait here, they will have some misgivings. I am afraid they will take the risk and follow Ban Chao's example. Let's not talk about the future. The change in Xuanwu Gate has already become an established fact. What can the emperor do?" Wei Zhigu frowned. "We can't possibly hold this banquet for the whole night, can we?" Yao Chong said, "It's useless even if we hold it for the whole night. If they send assassins, they can just say that it has nothing to do with us. If we hold a banquet like this, it will be easier for their people to sneak in." The princess said that she has already made arrangements. The princess is wise, and a woman is not inferior to a man. Let's follow the princess's plan. As long as we get through tonight, we will escort Luling back to the palace tomorrow morning. Our mission will be accomplished. Wei Jigu felt uneasy, but he had no other good ideas. He could only nod. The benefits of assassination were direct and enormous. Without concrete and direct evidence, one could not do anything to the other party. The public opinion of the world could not break through the last layer of window paper. However, if you wanted to solve the problem through assassination, you had to have more power than the other party, or have the confidence to win more support after the deed was done, or you could simply replace them and become the final controller. Otherwise, the backlash you would suffer would be 10 times the amount you gained. This was the fundamental reason why they could only fight back passively against Zhou Xing, Lai Junqin, and today's arrogant Wu clan. They could not be as unscrupulous as the other party. Wei Jigu frowned and sighed to himself. This night will not be easy. Chapter 821. Di Renjie had arrived and had his body carried in. As guests, Wu Qingxi, Wu Sanxi, Wei Jigu, and Yao Chong all came forward to pay their respects. After Wu Sanxi paid his respects, he said in an enigmatic tone, "Elder Di, you're already so sick. So why did you come to Dragon Gate? It's late at night and cold, so be careful that it won't be good for your body." Di Renjie ignored him. Yao Chong would give him a taste of his own medicine, saying that Elder Di had been ill for a long time and wanted to use the hot spring water to treat his illness. Di Renjie just stared at the Prince of Luling with a smile, his face full of gratification. Although this Prince of Luling was Gu Zhuting in disguise, Gu Zhuting still felt deep respect for this loyal official who had toiled his entire life. She hurriedly had Di Renjie be carried to the seat of honor and solemnly bowed to him to express the respect in her heart. In the eyes of Wu Sanxi and Wu Qingxi, her heartfelt actions naturally reinforced their belief that the Prince of Luling was the real one. Di Renjie's body was very weak, so he had someone put a cushion on his back to sit up. Speaking was still very strenuous, but he didn't need to say too much. As long as he still had a breath left, with his status as a senior statesman of 4 dynasties, no one would dare to be impudent in front of him. Perhaps relieved to see that the Prince of Luling was fine, Di Renjie actually spoke a few more words in delight. Although his voice was very soft and he was only using the proper etiquette to greet the Prince of Luling, Di Guangyuan was still extremely excited. He thought that the good news of the Prince of Luling's safe return had made his old father overjoyed, and that his illness had somewhat improved. Today's banquet was quite grand. At that moment, there were already 3 princes, 3 prime ministers, a princess, and a princess. Dragon's Gate Mountain was truly filled with relatives of the emperor and powerful officials. They were all gathered together. However, everyone had come in a hurry, so there was neither singing nor dancing. Everyone in the hall had their own plans, while the guards in the corridor were at daggers drawn. It was said that the Prince of Luling's legs were swollen and that it was difficult for him to walk. Wu Qingxi was suffering from tuberculosis and would cough from time to time. Di Renjie didn't even have the strength to cough. So how could the atmosphere of the banquet be good? Before Di Renjie had arrived, Wu Sanxi and Wu Qingxi had already confirmed the Prince of Luling's identity. Now that even the most important figure in the Prince of Luling's faction, Di Renjie, had dragged his sick body up the mountain to escort the Prince of Luling, they no longer had any doubts in their hearts. Since they had achieved their goal, and there was no chance to make a move, they had no interest in continuing the banquet. Wu Qingxi only wanted to leave as soon as possible so that he could discuss a countermeasure with Wu Sanxi. After suffering for half a day, Wu Qingxi coughed twice and said to the Prince of Luling and Princess Taiping, "Today's banquet is only to celebrate the return of the Prince of Luling. Now that the goal has been achieved, and the Prince of Luling, this prince, and Di Gulao are all unwell, I see that everyone is in a good mood to drink. Why don't we disperse early? Everyone can soak in the hot spring and rest early." Princess Taiping smiled and said, "I have the same intention, but I didn't expect Prince Wei to mention it. Elder brother, I see that you have traveled a long way and you already look tired. You must not have had a good rest on the way." Why don't we disperse now? The Prince of Luling, disguised by Gu Zhuding, hurriedly nodded and stroked his beard, saying, Prince Wei and Taiping are right. Since everyone has had a good time, and the King of Wei and the Prince of Luling are not feeling well, why don't we? Before Gu Zhuting could finish, she was interrupted by a burst of clear laughter. Ha 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 ha! The Dragon Gate Mountain is so lively tonight. Yes, Wulong, we are late. It doesn't matter if we are late. We should drink a cup of the Prince of Luling's welcoming wine first. Two voices echoed from the front of the hall. Everyone looked down and saw 2 rows of lanterns as bright as day. 2 rows of guards stood like spears. In the middle, 2 people walked side by side. They were dressed in light robes that were as white as snow. Their figures were tall and slender like a jade tree. When the 2 walked side by side to the bottom of the stairs, the lights here were the brightest. The bright light reflected on their jade-like skin, and their beautiful faces actually reflected a faint halo. It turned out that Zhang Changzong and Zhang Yiji had arrived. The 2 of them came suddenly, and no one came in to announce their arrival, so everyone in the hall was stunned and did not notice Yang Fan walking behind them. What a beautiful pair of men! Li Guerra looked at the pair of beautiful men and could not help but hold her breath. No matter if it was man or woman, they would instinctively arouse admiration towards beauty. These 2 beautiful young men had clear, watery eyes that were clear and pure, sharp and beautiful noses that seemed to have been carved by a blade, and they possessed a gentle appearance that was feminine to the point it didn't seem like a real person. Coupled with their fluttering attire, they possessed graceful bearings that made them seem like immortals. Who are they? What beautiful men! Li Guerra secretly exclaimed in her heart, and in a blink of an eye she saw Yang Fan. Yang Fan was standing next to the pillar of the pavilion by the door. The shadow from the beam made more than half of his face hidden under the lantern light. He was looking at the Zhang brothers with a smile that was not a smile as they arrogantly walked into the hall. His smile was very mysterious. That kind of expression had a kind of indecipherable feeling, like a mountain peak that pierced through the clouds was shrouded in fog. One could understand its precipitousness because it showed you the part under the fog, and not the peak that pierced through the clouds. Different from these 2 high-spirited young men in white, Yang Fan's appearance might not be as elegant as theirs, but it had a kind of masculine flavor. Yang Fan's expression might not be as ostentatious as theirs, but it had a kind of calm and reserved reservation. If one were to look at it from a woman's point of view, Li Guerra looked at Yang Fan, and then looked at the 2 elegant and beautiful young men. For a moment, there was a feeling that it was hard to tell who was better. Wu Sansi stood up in surprise and asked doubtfully, 5th Lang, 6th Lang, why are you here? Wu Qingxi had already understood, and couldn't help but stare fiercely at Princess Taiping. Zhang Changzong saw Li Guerra standing next to Li Xian, and his eyes immediately brightened. He sighed in his heart. What a beautiful woman! Her appearance is so beautiful that it cannot be compared to others. I have seen many beauties from the royal palace, royal mansions, and noble families, but none of them can compare to her. If I call her the number 1 beauty of our imperial court, I believe no one would object. Zhang Yiji was much more mature than his younger brother. Although Zhang Changzong was the most beautiful and was known as the 6th Lang of the Lotus, and was the favorite of Wu Zetian in terms of shrewdness, he was far inferior to his elder brother. That was why he always listened to Zhang Yiji. While Zhang Changzong was shocked by Guerra's beauty, Zhang Yiji's gaze swept across the hall, and all the guests entered his eyes. When he saw these people, Zhang Yiji understood in his heart, but his expression did not change. He only chuckled and pretended to be surprised and said, King Liang, King Wei, Prime Minister Yao, Your Highness, and this. Oh my, it's actually Elder D. Elder D is actually here as well. Why? Are all of you here because of the Prince of Luling? When Wu Qingxi heard Zhang Yiji's words, his heart sank. The thing he feared the most had finally happened. Aunt already knows that Luling has arrived at the Dragon Gate. Zhang Yiji's expression did not fade. He suddenly looked left and right and asked in a clear voice, "Who is the Prince of Luling? Please come forward and meet him." Gu Zhuting quickly stepped forward and cupped her hands. Zhang Yiji immediately came forward with a face full of smiles and said, "So this is the Prince of Luling, your subject Zhang Yiji. This is your subject's younger brother Changzong. Both of us work for the imperial censor in the palace. When the saint heard that your highness has arrived at the Dragon Gate, he was very happy and ordered us to come and greet you." Gu Zhuting said, "Thank you for your trouble. When can I follow you into the palace to meet the saint?" Zhang Yiji said, "When the saint received the news, it was almost dusk, and the city gates are now closed. Your highness is a prince. If you quietly return to the city in the middle of the night, it will be a disgrace to the imperial court and to your highness and the saint. It will inevitably be a breach of etiquette. May your highness stay at the Dragon Gate for a night. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises in the east, us two brothers will accompany your highness into the city." At this point, Zhang Yiji glanced at Wu Sanxi and Wu Qingxi with a smile, and secretly said, "Your highness, rest assured, under the feet of the emperor in the territory of the imperial city, what can go wrong? But the saint is worried about your highness, and specially ordered us to bring a regiment of Yulin royal guards. He? Just a mere hot spring steward. I'm afraid it can't be guarded well." There were 300 people in a regiment, and 300 Yulin royal guards had to guard a hot spring mountain. And the focus was only on one hall, so it was indeed enough. Gu Zhuting thought to herself, "It's good that there is no hurry to enter the city. At first, we didn't expect to be able to smoothly break through the Dragon Gate, so we were intercepted, so we didn't dare to let your highness follow us and take the risk. Right now, we don't know if your highness has entered the city, but if we delay for another day, I can attract everyone's attention here, and Prince Luling can safely enter the city." Wu Qingxi was greatly disappointed, and Wu Sanxi also couldn't help but reveal a disappointed expression. After spending so much effort, in the end it was all for naught. Finished speaking, Zhang Yiji said with a smile, "Who is hosting today's banquet? Since the two of us are here, we must at least toast to Prince Luling, to welcome your highness's return to the capital." The real Prince of Luling had been trapped on the mountain all these years and knew nothing about the outside world, so he had no idea that his mother was raising pretty boys. Gu Zhuting, however, knew that these two beautiful youths were the Empress's favorites and could be said to be the Prince of Luling's father. Her attitude was already very polite, and she quickly invited the two to take a seat. Wu Sanxi and Wu Qingxi couldn't just leave as soon as they arrived, and the two of them usually did their best to curry favor and flatter Zhang Yiji. Helpless, they could only return to their seats and accompany Zhang Yiji for a while to talk nonsense. Only then did they bring up the old topic again, wanting to go back and rest. Zhang Yiji had no intention of making things difficult for them, so the banquet ended, and everyone went back to rest. As soon as Wu Sanxi and Wu Qingxi left the Prince of Luling's residence, they hurriedly began a secret discussion. Wu Sanxi dejectedly said, "In the end, it was all for naught." Wu Qingxi tightly clenched his fists and angrily said, "I can't accept this." Finished speaking, he coughed violently again. Wu Sanxi rolled his eyes and muttered to himself, "I wonder which regiment of Yulin Royal Guard Zhang Yiji brought." Wu Qingxi shot him a glance and said, "What? You have people in the Yulin Royal Guard?" Wu Sanxi suddenly realized that he had misspoken and couldn't help but laugh dryly. Does Prince Wei not have his own people in the Yulin Royal Guard? Wu Qingxi laughed bitterly and said, "Forget it. With a great enemy in front of us, the two of us shouldn't keep trying. I'll be frank, I do. The problem is, I can't get in touch with them right now." Wu Sanxi said in disbelief, "Can't get in touch? You can't get in touch with your people?" Wu Qingxi coughed twice and said angrily, "You can get in touch? Don't tell me that you, a grand prince, are going to personally bribe a pawn? Personally meet with them?" Wu Sansi was dumbfounded. Ah. After a while, he said, "That's right. For the time being, even if my people are in this regiment, I can't get in touch with them." Wu Qingxi fiercely cursed him, "Idiot," in his heart and slowed down his tone. "This time, even though we can't make use of our spies, but it's not like we don't have a chance. A chance at least one more time. As for whether we succeed or fail, that's up to fate." Wu Sansi's eyes brightened, and he hurriedly asked, "You have a way?"